Going to go ahead and start the first budget review session, departmental presentations from the administration to the assembly. And if we can just go ahead and do the usual attendance, starting with the assembly first. Mr. Birch.
Chris Birch, Assembly.
Jennifer Johnston, Assembly.
Paul was here. Coleman, Debbie was here.
Elder Jackson, Assembly.
Patrick Flynn.
Bill Starr.
Dan Sullivan, Mayor. Mike Gutierrez.
Bernie Hall.
And are you guys going to be consistent at the table for this, or just consistently there?
What we're going to do, Mr. Chairman, is these folks will stay here throughout the finance presentation, and then they'll leave, and all the other directors will come up.
Got it. Okay. Just some guide rules for questions, mostly from the assembly members. I'd like to put them into two topics: the questions you'd like answers to right now, and then the questions that you would perhaps like a response to later. So if you can clarify that as you ask questions of the department, and perhaps at the end of their presentation, I'm not quite sure how they've structured their day, but if you can hold your questions just for a little while, that would be helpful. And then also, if somebody asks a question you'd like to be copied on the answer in a written form, kind of speak up to that. The plan is to have Barbara be a clearinghouse for that data, as opposed to generating 11 sets of questions that may be specific to one person's concern. So we'll try to do the hand raising thing. My meetings are generally a little more formal, so on the assembly side of things, if you feel like you have to interrupt, go ahead, and if it gets out of hand, I'll stop that. So I'll try to manage that. Their meetings are a little bit, I'll write them down and all of that, but let's go with the CFO.
Well, if I could first, Mr. Chairman, just sort of do the introduction.
Sure.
All right, and in your packet, you have on page 2 a list of the order in which we're going to do the departments. But what we're going to talk about today, we're going to combine the discussion of both operating budget as well as any capital projects associated with that department, as well as integrate into the discussion of the operating budget information about some of the performance measures, the mission of the department or the mission of the division, what are its goals for its upcoming year, and some of the measures they've identified. So you actually, we always talk about the inputs, how much money do we spend, how many positions are there, but we're also going to add to it what are the results that you can track progress in achieving the goals that the department for the divisions articulates. So we've integrated that into the presentation. As well as a discussion about some of the fee proposals that we have. So our goal is to try and consolidate, so you only have to talk to the department, not have to talk to the department, but we only have the departments here once, and we take advantage of them being here. So with that, we will start with the finance department.
Okay. So as most of you are aware, the primary focus for finance, IT, and purchasing in 2011 is on process improvements and efficiency initiatives. So what you're going to hear today from all of the department directors is a discussion of how we plan to achieve those goals. I had mentioned at our work session associated with efficiencies that we are planning to implement or to begin the implementation process in 2011 of a new ERP system for finance and HR, as well as a new system for our property appraisal group, which is our current CAMA system. So the common theme throughout all of the departments is that you will see a reduction in our labor costs in the operating budget because those labor costs are being moved to a capital budget in anticipation of approval of these major systems, which means their labor will be capitalized. And so for all of my departments, the financial impact of that change is just over $1 million. That's being moved from operating to capital. And then what you'll also notice is we will be requesting an increase in capital for the beginning of the implementation of these programs. The total is about $20 million. And so we will go through the discussion of that.
Might as well talk about it now, Debbie. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you confused me. So basically, you're talking about moving jobs to grants?
No.
Or wait, how can you move them?
We are required from the accounting principles perspective to capitalize labor that is associated with a major project. So we would be transferring the labor costs from an operating budget to a capital
No, I
budget.
heard that, but I don't
Okay.
understand it. Can you give me an example of one?
Yeah, the ERP system. Okay, so for example, when we work on the ERP system, there will be probably 5 or 6 different employees in the controller's department that will be working on the implementation of the ERP system. Well, that labor associated with working on the ERP system from an accounting perspective is required to be capitalized because the project is so large.
But it'll still be within the operating budget itself? You're
No.
gonna make it really hard to follow when labor costs. I don't understand the value of doing that at all.
Mr. Chairman, this is similar to what PM&E does. I mean, does that help? They charge capital projects for the cost of the positions that work on the project. So we currently do that now in terms of charging labor to PM&E.
So what will happen, Ms. Osiander, is our folks will be required to be preparing time cards that identify what portion of their time is operating versus what portion is charged to the capital project. And then through, for example, Kronos, the new time card system, they'll be able to track the amount that goes to capital.
But the value to us is actually negative because it's gonna be harder for us to track. I mean, I can see there must be some value in the accounting world, but frankly, it seems difficult. The difficulty is gonna exponentially increase in figuring out how the budget works. So I wish you could give me a sell job on this, because right now I'm really dubious.
When we come to you for the dollars for the ERP system, we'll be able to specifically identify those internal labor costs that we plan to capitalize. And then as we're working on the ERP, we will have reports that will tell us how much of our internal labor has been capitalized. But at the end of the day, we're still going to be managing FTEs.
And the value of having the labor capitalized is what?
Well, it's required, it's an accounting compliance requirement. It's a GASB requirement.
Well, if it's a GASB requirement, why haven't we done it before, and why doesn't other public entities do it? The school
Well-
district, for example.
You know, I don't know why the school district doesn't do it. I don't know why they don't do it, it's an accounting requirement.
May
Am I
need
the
to
only
move that from an
person?
immediate answer to get back to us with a better summary of the program as it relates to a schedule of that. You know, if you're gonna move a capital request to us, when will that actually happen, where we'd see the follow-up discussion?
We issued the RFPs 2 weeks ago for the ERP. This week, we had the pre-bid conference. We expect to make a decision on the ERP by the end of this year, meaning then we will get to you for approval probably January, February, depending on how long it takes for us to pull together all of the information, such that we can begin the planning and implementation process by the end of the first quarter.
Are you authorized to tap into your line of credit to start the capitalization purchases in the programs, or do you still need our approval on that?
We would need your approval on that. However, we have been talking with the organizations that could potentially finance this, and they are being prepped in advance in terms of how much we're thinking we might need, you know, in terms of a range of magnitude, so that we could incorporate that potential debt service into our budget, which we have done as a placeholder.
The 84 positions that you forecast in your budget, then, that's part of this reduction to move to capital? Is that how you're sort of summarizing it right now based on what Ms. Osiander asked?
What this means is 16 positions will be treated as capital. Yes.
Go ahead, Debbie, you still have the floor. So.
Okay, I'm just really frustrated, and I don't know, maybe everybody else is just fine and understands this. I don't understand the value of doing this besides additional layer of complexity. I hear you say it's a Gatsby requirement, but to my understanding, we've always had Gatsby requirements, and there's never been this approach. Is it too late to shift?
We can't shift.
You can't shift.
We can't shift.
Well, then, does it have to be reported this way to us? Because how can we look at an operating budget within a department in any kind of comparative way?
Mr. Chairman, what we can do is provide a supplementary report that would allow you to track this information while these two projects are going on. So if it takes 2 years, each year we'll provide a supplementary check. I mean, the grant, for example, grant projects, employees that are charged to grants. They're not in the operating budget technically, but we do include the information in the operating budget book.
No, I'm fine with that, that
Okay.
makes sense.
And so,
That's
but we
logical.
could work with you on what that kind of project report will look like, so that you can track just like you currently track.
Okay, we need, I think as a body, some kind of way to comparatively look at budgets, and this,
Was there some hand, LB, did you have a hand
I
up?
did have
Go
a
ahead.
hand up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. Is this a new GASB requirement? Question number one.
No.
Okay, I didn't think that it was. But the one thing that I don't remember, and correct me if my memory's off a little bit, but I don't remember this process when we implemented PeopleSoft.
I wasn't here then, were any of
I know you weren't,
I know you were then.
Who was besides Dick and I? But, you know, we can, you don't have to answer
We
that
can,
question.
we could research that.
Yeah, and just out of curiosity, I understand what you're talking about, but I was just curious to see if we did do this process. That's why I asked if it was a new GASB requirement.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Birch?
I'm familiar with the capital project program in that, you know, if the project's finished, the people who are associated with the project, those positions disappear. When this system is implemented, are the capital budget positions that are associated with the implementation of that position, do those positions also disappear?
It will depend on what position you're talking about. Some of them will be moved back into the operating budget, and then some others, and not necessarily the specific ones that were moved into capital here, may be eliminated due to efficiencies. Because we expect that when we implement the ERP, that we will have a return on our investment that will result in savings. Much of the savings is headcount.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
With this ERP as it goes like this, are you partnering with any of our enterprise funds, or is there any, are they part of it?
The ERP, or the RFP for the ERP includes all of the enterprise funds. And so we have asked the proposers to give us bids that include everyone, and then to provide the incremental costs associated with ML&P and AWWU, so that we can see those two entities separately. But everyone else is absolutely in, and then those two are to be determined.
Mr. Honeman?
Actually, my question was answered.
Okay. Move ahead.
Okay, well,
Okay, so, from there, each of the department heads will then just, or division heads will go ahead and discuss their budget, starting with Dave Ryan, our controller.
As far as the budget for the controller division, our expenditures are just under, we'll have an increase in 2011, just under 0.5%. I've got a couple of decreases and one increase. We've eliminated one vacant position in our accounts payable department, which will save us $84,000. And we have $195,000 of labor that will be capitalized on the new ERP system. That being said, we have a $115,000 increase in 2011 for a road survey we have to do for GASB for recording of our CAFR. We have to do that every 3 years. It was last done in 2008, and it's up again in 2011. So that's pretty much as far as expenditures in my department. Those are the major variances. My expectation right now is we will see a minimal impact on our services. We have another issue next year. We have a new GASB coming out on fund balance, which we have to prepare for at the end of 2011. And just due to the nature of the work that we do and the audit and the CAFR, we really don't get the luxury of getting behind on the work. So we have to come up with a strategy in our department to get the ERP system done and maintain our regular reconciliations and our systems and internal controls. So we're pretty much committed to making sure that happens for 2011.
I just have a question in the budget book presented by the administration. It doesn't show the decrease in personnel from your department. Is that a trade from a different department categorization? 9-3, Cheryl, for position changes, but it's not the budget changes suggested in.
Number 4.
I got it. Okay, never mind. Okay, thanks.
As far as I can talk very quickly about PBRs and what we have. So as far as our purpose, our biggest purpose is to provide accurate, timely financial information that's done on a semi-monthly basis, and we spend 5 months every year doing CAFR, which we usually present in the second assembly meeting in June. Of course, our goals are to accurately report that financial information with minimal errors and minimal management letter comments from our external auditors. And since payroll and accounts payable report to myself, our goal is to pay our employees and our vendors accurately and on time. And on time, I mean, we have, for accounts payable, we have standards per contractor, just 30 days. Our goal is to pay them on that period of time so that we can maintain our cash as long as possible. A couple of our graphs and points is audit. When we look at our audit points of the management order from 2007 and 09, it's gone down. It's went up in 08 and down by 1 in 2009. Of course, our goal is to minimize that and reduce that even further. We looked at our overtime costs. These are all associated with doing the audit. 2009 it was $70,000, and we were able to reduce that by almost $14,000 in 2010. So that's just efficiencies of having my supervisors in positions for greater than 1 or 2 years, and it actually, for the most part, was a pretty good CAFR season. We looked at the cost of the transactions on this page for producing vendor checks and for producing payroll checks. And the cost of vendor checks has gone down from $12 in 06 to $9 in 09. That will go down even further because the position that we're not filling became open halfway through 2009, and we have not filled that. And that was a travel position. We basically took that work and gave it to somebody else in the department. And as far as payroll checks, our costs have gone from 374 up to 492. That number, that's based just on the number of FTEs in my department. There's 4 in the payroll department, and we've had some open positions, so that number will fluctuate depending on the open positions.
Mr. Birch, go ahead.
I just had a question. What's the percentage of electronic payment transfers, either to vendors or, and is there any inducement or encouragement by the city to kind of push vendors that way?
There is now. We just started that process in the last year. I don't have the numbers with me. I actually have some graphs I can send out where it's starting to go up, but we are pushing it out more and more. It's very simple for us to push that out, and it's a lot cheaper and allows us to control our cash balances. So as time goes on, we'll see those numbers go up. But I'd be more than happy to send those graphs out if anybody's interested.
Oh, I'd encourage you to do that. That's great. Thank you.
Debbie?
I just wanted to figure out how best to ask questions about fees. So I wondered if when people come forward, if they've got fee increases, they could let us know so we'd know to turn the pages. Because I noticed there are some finance fees here.
Absolutely. Can you,
They're integrated into the slides.
So we'll know when to ask questions because it's.
Yes.
There's none
Thank
for
you.
the control.
Patrick?
You mentioned every 3 year, was it GASB certification?
We do a GASB road survey. We use a modified approach for our road infrastructure, which basically means we don't depreciate them. And under GASB, what that means is we have to keep a database of the quality of our roads. And under GASB, it has to be updated every 3 years. So the municipality actually has a policy that there's different levels from 0 to 5, from 0 being the worst, 5 being good condition. Our policy is that we maintain 60% or more of our roads in good or better condition. So they come and they do the survey, and that data is used to determine what percentage we're at, and we report that in our CAFR. So for the last time it was done was 2008, and our percentage was 80.18. So because of the GASB rules, we're required to spend that money in 2011 to get a new update.
And that's reflected in your contractual other services on 9.6?
Yes.
Okay, I just didn't see that broken out anywhere else, so. Okay, thank you. That's about 130, you said?
It's 115,000.
15.
15, yeah.
Thank you.
Could you expand on the payroll efficiencies as it relates to a couple things? One of them is a year ago or a year budget cycle ago, I proposed, moving some payroll specialists from this case, the fire department over to centralized payroll processing. Are we going to see those gains fully realized with your latest trend towards the payroll efficiencies that we just approved? Can you summarize how we can expect to see those occur?
I think what's going to happen that we just, I'm not sure if we signed the contract yet for Kronos, but we're in the process of signing the contract for the electronic timesheets. And as we go through that process and bring all the departments online, we're hoping we see some efficiencies and some cost savings there. So I'm not exactly sure, probably by the end of the year, within 6 months, we should have everybody online and we should start seeing some savings from there. I'm not exactly sure how quick we'll see those savings, but that's what we're moving towards.
Well, not to be facetious here, but what's the gain that we're gonna see then if all we did was approve a purchase price of $500,000 for a software upgrade? When do we see the realized labor costs show up in the budget books? My statement, and it's not to draw friction, but my resolution that identified that efficiency gain is now almost 12 months old, and you're telling me we're gonna see it, and it's 24 months to make a systems change. I guess I'm wondering where do we see it? Or when do we see it beyond that statement that you just made?
We fully plan to have cash savings as a result of the implementation of the electronic time cards. They have not been incorporated in this budget because we were not able, at the time that this budget was prepared, to determine specifically which departments the savings will occur. By the time we do the first quarter budget revision, we will have good numbers because we will be well into our implementation, and we fully plan to incorporate those savings into first quarter budget revision.
Adjustments, okay.
Yeah.
How many payroll specialists do you have throughout the municipality with that classification, do you know?
I don't have that number with me.
I do.
Maybe, well, if you want to answer it now, or you could maybe just provide that data to all the assembly members so we can watch those trends change. That would be my request for a question. Anybody else? Elvie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there used to be one payroll clerk in every single department, but my thoughts are, and please correct me if I'm wrong, even with, Kronos, you're still gonna need somebody within the department to manage the new program. Am I correct?
Other cities that have implemented Kronos and have moved employees to direct online entry of time data have not needed to have payroll people in their departments.
Okay.
And so we are moving down the path, expecting that we won't need to have them as staffed as they are today. For example, the fire department, if they have 4, hopefully, we'll be able to go down to maybe 1. I don't know if we can fully eliminate it.
That was my point.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we can fully eliminate it. It's premature for us to make that decision until we go through the detailed analysis.
Right.
But we are off the charts negatively in regard to our payroll benchmarks. And so our goal is to absolutely make that process more efficient for both employees as well as the payroll department. It should be a much more accurate process as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The return on investment number you put out when we justified the approval, you had an ROI in your statement, didn't you?
Yes.
What was that?
It was about 400% to 500%. I don't remember precisely.
Of your processing costs, or of your total? You had a number that the mayor said was a percentage of your overall payroll was sort of the anticipated or the expectation being. Do you remember that?
It was 0.5%.
Total payroll.
We attributed 0.5% of the benefits associated with improved accuracy of payroll. We had another component of savings that was related to reduction of FTEs to perform the process.
Right.
And then the third component of savings was related to improved tracking of FMLA, which at this point is entirely manual and very difficult.
Good answer. Thank you. Ready?
Okay, my name is Dan Moore, I'm the city treasurer. For treasury, we're a division of 29 people, about a $3 million budget. For 2011, our proposal is very much focused on a major direct cost savings, which involves passage of a special ordinance. This is a cost causer, cost payer concept where we would take the commissions that we pay our external collection agency, we actually have 2 of those agencies, and we would pass them on to the debtor. Over the history of the city has always budgeted for the commission costs that we pay to external agencies. With the budget constraints that we have and the fact that this is a cost causer payer concept that I think a lot of people would support, we're making it through the ordinance that you're going to see on Tuesday, making it possible to pass all this cost on to the debtor. And that will no longer be part of our budget. The number that's cited here of $170,000 was the original budget number for 2010. In August of this year, the Assembly appropriated supplemental money because our commissions have gone up substantially due to success of our agency. So the actual revised budget number is $320,000. That's what you'll see is cited as savings in the summary of economic effects that accompanies the ordinance. So that ordinance is scheduled for introduction on October 26th with public hearing on November 9th. And it's a very important ordinance for us to hopefully get approved so that then we can start to implement and have in place before the end of the year.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Mr. Moore, thank you for that. I'm in general fully supportive of that. I passed it on to the person who owes the money. But with a certain amount of money that comes in guarantee, I guess, from the municipality, does that not encourage collection agencies to, I mean, they're going to get paid something. If they have to rely on the debtor to pay, and perhaps they don't have the ability to pay, or at least over the near term, do you think we may see a diminishment of collections because perhaps they don't give it the same energy, or?
No, and we've talked to both our agencies about it. I think what's going to happen here is that we will make sure that the debtors know that there's going to be additional cost, additional consequence. Right now, there's no consequence if you pay today or you pay 3 years from now. And so we're trying to say after a certain point, you're going to pay substantially more. We do control the commission rate that the agencies charge, and they will basically, once they get an account referred to them, they will immediately tack on the equivalent of the commission. And then that's what they will notify the debtor about and say, this is now what you owe. And in terms of collectability, for the city, we're going to be paid 100% of what is collected. In the past, we've been paid 77% on average. So we will be fine. And it's really going to become the receivable of the collection agency and no longer our receivable. So that's a good thing. And they're incentivized. They would love to collect a bigger receivable because they will make more money. And that's a very good incentive for them. And it works well for us. So,
Debbie?
This includes also fees owned. So, for instance, right now we have ambulance fees with the collection agency. So does this mean that ambulance service fees will increase?
Yes, if there are new accounts with ambulance and the person is not paid within a period of time, and with ambulance we give them a significant amount of time to pay,
Well,
then they will be notified and they'll say, it's your personal responsibility, just like with any medical bill, and you must pay, otherwise there'll be further consequences. So that's how we're approaching
the old
it.
agreement on ambulance fees said, particularly in my area, that would be outside, excuse me, of the Anchorage Fire Department, that there's a time interval where potentially hardship cases can be excused any fee. And if you implement this, what happens to that provision?
The hardship aspect of ambulance is dealt with at the fire department. So they are able to approve and to write off hardships. By the time it goes to a collection agency, it's an account that is determined to be valid, collectible, and not subject to hardship.
Okay, I'm gonna have to talk to the fire department, I guess, to
Right.
make sure that I understand the implications for areas outside.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right.
Mr. Trainee?
On the collection agencies, how often are we going to put that contract out for bid?
It's every 5 years, and we just did it about a year ago. And our
How
original
long is that one good for? 5 years?
five more. Well, it's 4 more years. Yeah.
And that was my next question, is how many collection agencies are we using, one or multiple?
We're using multiple, and at one point we had 3, and now it's down to 2. And our third one, we actually had competing side by side for the court fines, and they weren't performing as well, and they chose not to bid again. So we ended up with the most successful agency on the court fines, and they're out of Texas, and we use a local agency for all other types of fines and fees that are owed to the city. So we have two different agencies, one's local, one's in Texas. The Texas one specializes in court fines, and they're highly successful with what they do.
Okay, so if they're not successful, is there a mechanism to shut them down and change the contract, put it back
Yeah,
out for bid?
there's ability in the contract to terminate with relatively short notice and to move on to a different agency or to shift to a pre-existing agency. We have that flexibility. Right now, their results are almost double this year what they were last year, so they're doing extremely well.
The thing would be to assembly members, this in front of us has to pass before we approve the budget. Because the budget we're currently dealing with is predicated upon these fines and fees going into effect. So as we're processing this, we'll have to take up the passage of this first before we deal with the budget. Just to keep it
I appreciate that. One of my challenges, I'd like to see it fleshed out in some public forum. I wouldn't necessarily appreciate a kickback to the Budget and Finance Committee, but maybe perhaps tagged along with the 3 public hearings that we have for the budget. So
It would be just in the order what we're gonna do with it, because this is being introduced on Tuesday. This will pass before the 7th when we approve the budget.
no question. I just want to make sure we get the public input accommodated in some
Oh, you'll get
form.
lots of public input.
Well, we'll
They
talk
know
about
about
the
it.
best how to handle that, correct?
I would suggest the public takes a look at this, because across the board, the fines and fees are going up dramatically. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I don't know who to direct this to. When we
Well, he's
get-
running the budget portion
Well,
of it.
it's more about how to handle this. One of the things that I know will help me, there isn't as much concern on my part with the criminal fees as there are with things like the ambulance fees. And I don't know if you could somehow break down and give us some more information to show us what kind of fees this includes.
Sure.
Thank you.
That's all from me, Bill.
Mr. Honeman, did you have something to add?
No, I follow with Mr. Sims.
You're not going to pass by your PVR slide, are you?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'll try to get through the rest of it real fast. Okay? So that was the overview of our budget. We have very little capitalized to the camera project, but we have a small amount there. If you go to the next slide, which is the accountability slide, our purpose in Treasury is to maximize revenues. We focus on the primary revenues for the city, and that's very much what we're about is the revenue generation. Our goals are to improve and collect the collection of taxes and fees and fines, to offer e-commerce more and more through website e-commerce, and to make sure that we timely post and analyze revenues on a regular basis. The next slide on one of our.
Can I just stop you there for a second, because I'm critical oftentimes of the departments, and one of the things that I want to make sure is emphasized is, as the critical questions come, shouldn't be interpreted as not doing a good job. I want to go on the record, you do an amazing job, given the fact that you have, and I've seen it now because I've started to focus on it over the last 18 months, and your ability to revenue forecast the city is a valuable tool. So I want you to understand that I really appreciate that.
We're all there.
Incredibly, from all the stress that goes with trying to say what this is going to do, what the market's going to do, the reports that I see coming out are wonderful. The only suggestion I have, and you put it as a goal of your department, was to merge the ability to see the data a little bit more timely, so that we can compare it to our expense and get a full package snapshot. We've come a long way on this assembly body and having data available to us to make ongoing decisions. When revenue data lags by a month or two, and I understand your task at hand prevents some of that from me occurring. So as you can emphasize programs that would get us the data quicker and pair it up with the expense side, I'd be real happy.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Okay, sure. Thank you. The performance measure, the first one, this just says that what revenue is Treasury collects. When you compare that to our cost, we collect many times more than what we cost. So property taxes, of course, is the big one. It's 500 some times more than the cost. The lowest one is delinquent criminal fines and fees, which are the toughest to collect, but we still collect 10 times more than our cost. So that's the main point on that. If you go to the next chart, this shows what we pay per dollar collected, both internally and externally, on the delinquent criminal fines and fees. You can see the top line is the cost we pay for to our collection agencies, and the bottom line is what it costs us internally to collect. We use the external collection agencies because of the high volume and the incentives that they have to succeed. However, I can say the top line will go away if you approve the ordinance that's going to you on Tuesday, because we'll no longer have that top cost as our cost, it'll be the debtor's cost. So that's a very good thing for lots of reasons. And you can see that the cost to the commissions has actually gone down over time as we did the request for proposal. So it's a very competitive world, and we've gotten very good commission rates. Okay, if we go to the next slide, this is there are a few revenue proposals that are part of that omnibus bill that Assemblymember Ocean is referring to. And so we were asked to just highlight a few that tie directly to finance. Most of the ones you see in there are tied to departments all around the city. The dishonored check, this currently we charge $20 for an NSF check. That'll go up to $30. That's the industry standard, and that's what's allowed by state law. And it's not a huge revenue thing for us at all, but it is bringing us up to standard. The fee hasn't changed in, I think, almost 20 years. So when we looked at fees, we looked at ones that had not changed, and we want to make sure we're current. So that's that one. The aircraft tax, this was a tax that was, it's actually a registration tax. It was approved in 1994. And do you want me to stop now?
Just caught up in the aircraft tax. Go ahead.
Actually, I think.
Not there yet,
Debbie.
you will be.
No, we're hearing from particularly planes at Birchwood Airport who say, heck, we get no municipal service at all. And this is a state-maintained airport. All we're gonna see, I think, is people registering their planes in the valley who are currently at Birchwood. I'd say at Merrill Field, you got an argument. But how can, what's the logistics? I mean, what argument can I give for this?
I was going to say, and I don't have the policy argument, but I can just say from a sort of stale revenue standpoint, the rates have not changed since 1994.
I guess I want the policy.
And so when we looked at it, we said the rates are in the big picture dirt cheap, and they haven't changed since 1994. Before 94, it was based on the value of the aircraft. These individual owners paid thousands of dollars per aircraft. In today's world, they pay $75 per year for a single engine, $125 per year for a twin engine. So this is doubling the rates, which sounds like a lot, but still dollar-wise, it's not a huge amount of money.
Well, we're going to flesh this out, but not to interrupt the topic, but the user-payer type of arrangement where we're generating fees that go directly back to the services that we're collecting for. Debbie's right. GVX, a volunteer fire department, the state plows, in Birchwood in particular, as it may relate. So we're going to need some sort of statement that says the aviation community benefits from X, and it could be just that. But just to collect more money, that's $1 million in 4 years that you're asking these aircraft owners to pay.
I think Marty did you have a comment?
When originally under our tax scheme for property taxation, all of this property was taxable, the same as any other type of property. Automobiles, aircraft, snow machines, and everything else. These fees were set up to be in lieu of a regular property tax. They're simpler to administer and cost a lot less, but they're supposed to replace the revenue that's lost from regular property tax. And regular property tax isn't levied on a relationship between your services provided and the value of the property.
Well, without being flippant, I would say aircraft hangars are taking up that gap. I mean, you're seeing
They are still taxed.
they are on state lands, and that whole argument that goes with that. You're seeing a proliferation of aircraft hangars, both at Birchwood and at Merrill, and that property tax is solely related to the aircraft industry. They're paying their fair share. It'll be my independent analysis over and above the 75 to 150, but
Thanks, Marty, though.
I'm conflicted out because I are one. Mr. Trainee?
Okay, on the first thing, you're increasing dishonored checks. Can we get a mechanism to peg that to the CPI? So we don't have to wait till it comes back to us again. But just as CPI goes up, so will the cost of dishonored checks.
This particular fee is
Set by
fixed,
state.
it's a flat amount by state law, so.
We can't change it to a
Locally,
CPI.
we can't index it locally, no.
Okay, thank you.
I saw a couple other hands over here, but
My question was answered.
go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, Dan, thanks very much.
We're getting to the one.
Looking at your goal of enhanced service through e-commerce, I know you can't pay unless you're willing to pay a premium, you can't pay your property taxes electronically or with a credit card or anything like that. is there gonna be a way you can pay it, at least if you have an online bill pay program through your financial institution at some point in the future?
We do accept payments where people do the bill pay through a financial institution, so we take those already. With the credit card option, we know it can be expensive.
Right.
But we still have a couple thousand people a year that do it for cash flow reasons or air miles or whatever their incentive is. And the rate had actually come down. It used to be 3%, now it's 2.75%. We do give them an option to do an e-check online, which is only like somewhere around $3 flat fee. So there is a very, very cheap, convenient option for them to pay property taxes. A lot of times the credit card they desire that for other reasons. And so we feel that we've given them good options. What they choose, it's their choice.
So people can use their online bill pay program now?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
I want to encourage the debate to continue on the fees and fines
Okay.
schedule in the public hearing process. So, we could refrain from that, but we've got opportunity, and I'll try to facilitate through Chairman Trainee on how to best get public input back to you on that action item. So,
And I just have one other slide. Okay, this is the last revenue one, and this is definitely a big change here. The motor vehicle registration tax, which generates about $5 million per year. The rate schedule is also set in state law. And there's sort of a bottom level, and then there's a graduated level. And so, as a local community, you can pick which set of rates that you want for your community, as long as you don't exceed the maximums within state law. In this case, the rate schedule that the city has followed has been the same since 1978. It hasn't changed since the beginning. So we are the lowest, I won't use the term dirt cheap again, okay? We are the lowest in the state, and yet we're the biggest city. Mat-Su, which is obviously a bustling area and right our sister community, they pay about the highest rate. They're right close to the top. And so what this proposal in the fines and fees omnibus ordinance is proposing is to bring the city of Anchorage's rates to those of Mat-Su. And then that way it takes away the incentive of people registering in Anchorage but living in Mat-Su and all those types of things. So it definitely brings parity to the situation. It does increase rates significantly. So it shows you what the difference is, let's say on a new car going from $29 to $150. And it has different rates for different ages of cars. The ordinance, the way it's state requires, we have to give notice a year in advance to make these changes. So the auto tax would not start to increase until starting January 1, 2012. So it does not have an impact on the 2011 budget. Because of the way they charge the auto registration tax, it's done biennially, and they do it on a number of year cars. So we're not going to see the $3.9 million increase all in 2012. You'll see it spread out between half in 2012, half in 2013. That's how it'll come into play. So it is a kind of a long lead time, but it's something that, again, when we looked at all the revenues and we looked at this one, it is extremely easy to administer and put in place. We actually don't involve ourselves with collection. The state DMV does it. We pay them an 8% collection fee. They do a very good job with it. Every month we get a check, and this is simply changing the rate structure, and it's your decision on whether to support it.
And if I could clarify, Mr. Chairman?
I think we got enough, actually.
Well, I just want to correct something. I wrote the
Okay.
slide. Okay, it increases by $29 to $150, not the difference.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's an important
clarification.
I missed that. All right.
You guys, Debbie, did you have one?
Well, I can wait for the next slide.
Go ahead.
On the positive side, I talked to Mayor yesterday, and the state has agreed to get rid of the IM program. It's now onto the feds. So as soon as the feds give us permission, IM is dead. That way you're not gonna pay as much to register your car. On the positive side too, it means the car dealers will be running ads. Buy your car now because you want to pay as much to the city on taxation on it. I can see the ads now.
I don't
That's all,
want
Bill.
to, I don't want to write the IM.
But Chairman,
Termination.
6 cars are gonna get.
9.
I want to just take a second too. The Budget Advisory Commission has got a bunch of folks in the audience I see back there, and so Barbara, if you can make sure the answers get to those guys through Cheryl for the continuation questions, and maybe just raise your hand on who's doing their civic help here. Awesome to see you guys. Heather, come on. Yeah. And Adam, I think is Adam Trombley is
He's a father, isn't he?
nursing a new taxpayer or future taxpayer. Thank you.
That's all I had.
Thank you. Nice job.
Property Appraisal Division. My name's Marty McGee, I'm the assessor. The slide's kind of self-explanatory. The one part I want to talk about a little bit is the CAMA project, which is of course huge for us. We're operating a system which was originally developed in 1984. It's one of the 2 legacy systems that remain in the mainframe environment for the city. So removing it should improve efficiencies in a whole lot of different areas, and that's why we have such an emphasis to do that. The 35 full-time positions and 6 part-time positions is accounting for this capitalization of labor directly associated with that project. Our goal is to have the RFP issued by year end, I believe, and to have a new system in place by year end of 2012. That's an ambitious goal, but we think it's achievable. There are about 3 to 4 viable alternatives, and we have to evaluate those, and the only way we can is by their submitting a detailed bid to the RFP that we're going to issue. So a lot of questions about how much efficiency we will gain, how much impact it'll have, depends upon the system and what we'll learn by working through this RFP process. We won't be eliminating all of those 6 positions as we go into the next budget cycle, but we expect there will be some as a result of efficiencies gained by new systems and new operations. And again, it's difficult to answer that question until we've evaluated all the systems to have a complete answer to that.
One quick question. I've seen the consistency in the slides where it says FT to PT. Is the part-time, is part-time, as I'm thinking it's less than 40 hours per week, is that?
No, they'll be working 40 hours a week, but for instance, my deputy assessor, who's the main technology guy, he'll be dedicated half of his salary for the next year will come out of the capitalized labor portion of the budget.
Thank you.
So that's why there's, and all of the management positions are making a significant portion of their time, about a quarter for most of the remaining management positions dedicated to doing this project.
Does the CAMA project upgrade, is the public going to see a difference in the interface that they currently have?
The answer is yes. Exactly what depends upon the system we buy. It will definitely integrate into the municipal website better, and it will relate better to other municipal systems. One of the main ones that we have to interact with a lot, which is almost entirely non-electronic right now, is with building permitting and building inspection. And by having a new system, we can get those 2 systems to talk to each other and gain efficiency there. So
I really
things like
appreciate,
that.
I appreciate the property appraisal website right now. It's a marvelous tool, and I refer to it constantly.
And of course, our objective is to make it better, not to lose anything from what we've got. So that's the criteria we've written into the RFP.
Patrick?
The debt service increase, is that for paying for the CAMA system?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The state compliance, the state assessor was here a couple of years ago, talked about your, I guess there's some ratio on how many properties.
Right.
How are we doing in that department?
We cover that in the performance slides. It's what we call the sales ratio. We're doing very well. When we get that slide, you'll be able to see specifically.
That's the 94% number, or whatever it was.
Right.
Yeah, great. Okay. Carry on. Thanks.
So one of the main areas that we spend a lot of labor cost on right now is inspecting property. And we use a pretty old-fashioned, antiquated methodology to do that. The other problem for us in terms of administering the assessment is the quality control review of data input of those inspections, which is highly labor-intensive right now. So what we're trying to do is get tools out of these new systems, which allow us to be a lot more efficient in the way we do that. So that pretty much covers that slide. And then we're talking about the PDRs after that. I've already talked to you about what our goals are, so we can move on to the next slide, I think. This shows you the sales ratio that you were just
Debbie had a question in that slide.
On goals, one of the things that we regularly hear is people don't understand how the property tax evaluation system works, and they don't understand how to appeal. You and I have had conversations.
Right.
I know Mary Ann Burke's brought that up a couple times in her reports to us. Have you looked at that as a goal to just clarify?
We have that as one of our PBRs, is to
Oh,
increase the, we didn't include all of them, I think, in the
Okay.
summary that you've got here. But in
Okay,
the
well,
budget
I'm
book,
glad.
it is included as one of the performance measures.
Okay, and then one other quick question. I know I get calls, and I bet everybody does, from people who are like 3 days late or 1 day late paying their taxes. And they freak out when they see the penalty because I'm only 1 day late, I've never been late in 40 years. When you're going to reevaluate fines and fees, have you talked about, and I would urge you to look at some sort of a graduated fee system so the bump isn't so hard if you're 1 day late?
Dan has to speak to that. 'cause
Oh, Dan,
I'm not
I'm
the bad
sorry.
guy this time.
I think that type of thing is possible to follow whatever the law says. We do actually in the current law have a 7-day grace period, and we also honor US Coast Guard. So we advertise the official due date, but if someone is 7 days past that due date and they put it in the mail on that 7th day, we'll still consider it timely. So there's already something in there that gives them a lot of cushion.
Oh, no. It seems like the people who call me
Yeah.
aren't getting that.
You gotta mail it in.
Yeah, our mail takes
Yes,
7
it takes
days
a
to
long
get
time.
in.
The bridge was out.
Go ahead and wrap up, Marty.
You have volunteer mail delivery.
Cheaper and better.
So I'll move on to the next slide with, this one covers a lot. The cost per property in terms of the administration is included as one of our measures. That's the bottom one. Next slide. Appeal process, the number of appeals, we're consistent with our new appeal system and declining slightly, but I don't think that's much of an indication of anything changing there. And the cost per appeal. Now, cost per appeal is another area we could probably have some savings out of a new system. Because we can do a new kind of document management system. We're essentially operating a little court system with the appeal process. And we have a lot of document copying and transferring and transmitting that goes on as part of that process. And if we can make all of that electronic, that's our objective. And we'll save a lot in terms of administrative costs on the appeal process.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, sure.
How do you project how many appeals are gonna be filed in a given year?
Two things. One is we look at the amount of market activity, what's going on, the volatility, so that gives us some idea of what we'll have in dispute. And the other, we definitely look at what we're doing in terms of any kind of corrections to something that we've discovered as an inequitable value that we've changed. And that gives us a measure. And we look at the historical trend.
So you can predict sort of, so many people are gonna get a much higher bill this year than they've gotten in the past.
Right.
Okay.
And actually, part of that public education process works hand in hand with that. Because if we notify the segment of the community about why the change is occurring, we generally don't generate a lot of appeals out of it. If they find it as a surprise, then it tends to generate a lot of appeals, and we have to answer the question now.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yep, and it says cost per appeal, does that include, that number include I guess the fee that the petitioner appellant filed?
Yeah, the fees generally have been generating almost a zero net gain in terms of impact fiscal. We're refunding most of the
Right,
fees.
if they make it to the appeal, they show
Yeah,
up.
so we're not generating additional operating money out of the fees. But yeah, it is taken into consideration. So the last slide here is the capital project, which we're currently estimating at $5 million. And that's a very rough estimate based on preliminary information we've got from the different system providers.
Thank you. You ready?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Ross Riswell. I am the manager of the Public Finance and Investments Division. And got a small group of 4 people, including myself. We have a fairly flat direct cost budget for 2011. I think in large, some of that's related to non-rep salary and benefit increases for 2011. The 3 people that report to me are non-reps, for information. So it's a small group, and our purpose is to prudently and efficiently manage the debt portfolio of the municipality, as well as the investment portfolio of the municipality, and provide liquidity to meet daily cash requirements for operating expenses and such.
What is the outstanding debt of the municipality right now?
Approximately, if you include everything school district, general government, ABLES, ML&P, approximately $2 billion. Our goals to support the purpose of the division is to maintain a AA rating that the municipality has. We have 2 rating agencies that we routinely use for general purpose debt. We refund outstanding debt whenever there's a present value savings that we can achieve. We also invest in securities that comply with the Anchorage Municipal Code. And we try to provide an investment return net of fees that outperforms the benchmark for the MOA's aggregate portfolio. These are 2 of our measurements for our goals, and of course the first one is we would like to and try to strive to maintain the AA rating provided by S&P and Fitch Ratings. The Fitch Ratings has a plus after its AA plus rating, and that was a recent upgrade within the last 6 months approximately. The word stable means that there's no extenuating circumstances that the rating agencies are evaluating at this time. So that's a good thing to have after the rating. This is a summary of the net present value savings of some of the refunding activity that we've had in the past couple of years. In 2008, there wasn't any refunding activity. Prior to that, in the years prior to that, when rates were trending downward, there was significant amounts of activity of refunding outstanding debt in the municipality. It's tapered off a bit, but even as as interest rate environment stays at a stable, level, flat time frame over the yield curve, the debt outstanding, the composition of that debt outstanding still changes, so that sometimes debt will come into play that is effective to refund. And that's a summary of the outstanding debt we refunded.
Does your group also manage the TANs on the short term?
Yes.
So you manage that, and you're looking at how does that look for the anticipated TANs funding level that you've got?
We would anticipate that we would issue again this year in 2011, probably in February, a TANs transaction to help us get over the our revenues, of course, with tax receipts due in June and August of each year. We have a seasonal low point of general government's funds, which occurs in about May.
Yeah,
So that's
talk finance with you. Is it inappropriate to measure the cash position? Is it inappropriate to measure the cash position of the city by how much you borrow? Or you find it to borrow it as an investment? I think are you going to forecast $150 million of borrowings this year?
Well, we borrowed 120, I think, in 2010, and we would forecast a number close to that. I don't think it's going to.
Well, in years past, there was a trend where we only borrowed $90 million in terms of the TANs leveling opportunities, and I guess I asked the question: are we borrowing upwards of that amount from a cash position of the municipality, or are you weighing it with the investment opportunities that you have to borrow at that rate?
The dollar amount that we borrow is determined by the seasonal low point, which occurs in May. That's the dollar amount. And we borrow only approximately 90% of what we forecast that low point to be. And the reason we do that is because under IRS regulations, we have to spend every dollar that we borrow. Otherwise, we would have to rebate all of the interest earnings on that borrowing to the U.S. Treasury.
Okay, don't want to do that. Mr. Birch?
What's the longest period of time that $2 billion in debt? When does that when does it zero out? On the current schedule, is it? I mean, it's probably all the way across the board. But what would be the longest period of time? If you were to borrow zero from today forward, where would that?
Mr. Birch, for general government, for general purpose debt, which is general government, and the school district debt, we generally borrow at 20 years.
20.
Okay. So the lion's share of that is at 20-year debt or less. And then ML&P, which I included in that $2 million total, they have a 30-year debt. There's a couple of 30-year debt issues outstanding. One recently in 2005, so it's 25 years left. So probably none of our debt goes past 25 years.
Thank you.
Mr. Drummond, we're about an hour in, so we want to kind of keep moving along.
Forgive me for being late, but I do have questions too.
No problem at all.
I just wanted to observe that I'm pretty sure that those schedules are in the CAFR, aren't they?
Yes.
So you can look at it last year's.
And I've had good success just calling department heads directly and asking away, so. Purchasing?
That's the last slide I have, so.
This is just the slide for my little itty bitty department of 2, salary and benefits. And, we're going up just for salary increases, offset by some decreases in professional services. So if you don't have any questions, we'll just move on to IT.
For your TDRs?
You saw them at the efficiency session, remember? Total finance.
I was teasing.
I was tempted to put it in, but. So I'll turn it over to Gail to talk about IT.
Hello, Gail Turner, the current acting IT director. I have a small department of 77 that I manage. We are proposing 2 cuts in positions. One of those is a service desk position that's currently vacant. And what we're proposing to do there is we have a second shift that's still manned, kind of a holdover from the mainframe. We have many more applications on there. So we've looked at that and we're going to be automating a lot of the processes that they're overseeing and changing that to a standby call scenario where if there are problems in the night, someone will answer that by phone and call out the right people to handle what's going on. That's a savings of about $96,000 in our budget. The other position was in looking at our budget, we found that we had a position that was funded, but that was also grant funded. So we proposed to eliminate the double funding. Another cut in our budget or savings to the city was we absorbed about $50,000 in PBX maintenance that departments were paying into our current budget with no increase. We've been able to do that by negotiating lower costs and actually doing things that cut the cost of the PBX maintenance. And we're going to continue to go forward with those cuts. This allows us to manage that budget wholly and continue to negotiate better pricing. As far as CAM and ERP projects, we're proposing to charge about $600,000 of our labor to capital for these projects. They are huge projects. We'll have about 17 staff working on between those 2 projects and charging portions of their labor. And we're adding $339K for debt service for the ERP project. The changes here proposed are minimal impact on our level of service. So our purpose is really to provide a sound computing environment and in a cost-efficient way to the municipality. Our goals are to reduce our costs, to deliver more services, specifically to the public via online services, and deliver more, and to provide excellent service, customer service to the city and to the public, and to apply best practices to how we deliver services. So we're looking at our policies, redoing policies, and looking at our processes and make sure that we're using best practices as we revamp it. For accountability, one of our measures is to measure our uptime of critical applications to the city. As you can see, we've had a couple of outages on camera this year, but we've done a good job of maintaining the systems, even in budget cut scenario, of keeping major systems up. We're also measuring how many new applications we're putting online that create efficiencies. We've produced the online pay advice, bus passes online, dog licenses online, public notices online, and assisted APD with putting their ticket payments online this year so far. We also have the online benefits in process, and so that will show up in our next measurement. For the capital budget, our major project is the ERP. We've estimated at $13.7 million. I'll tell you that that's really an estimate. We received some numbers from an independent consultant that showed The price could be anywhere between 3 to 13.7 million. So we put it at the high cost,
Little
hoping
range
it's gonna be, hoping it's gonna be at the lower end.
Jeez.
Some other projects we have in here are 1.3 million, and that really is, we're looking at some new technology to deliver desktops, to deliver desktop virtualization. We're piloting that technology, and if that proves to show a total cost of ownership and efficiencies for the city, this is to initiate the desktop virtualization. And system security, this is to look at a device to centralize our monitoring and be more proactive in how we deliver security for computing systems.
Your attorney Kama, attorney Kama, is anybody else contributing to the Kama debt service? How many more places we see this pop up to 339?
Yeah, the debt service for CAMA is only in property appraisal, and then the debt service for the ERP is in the IT budget. They're the same number for both systems. That's why we need
We're using the exact same number.
They just happen to be the same.
4 million.
Cam was 5 and your
I know, but we're looking at just for 2011. Okay, so if we can push out some of the financing into 2012, which we elected to do that, so that we wouldn't have to take the full hit in 1 year for the full debt amount. So what we did was we estimated cash flows and then tried to match the funding with the cash flows so that we could minimize the interest expense associated with the loan.
Then we're gonna do a straight bank loan on this, or we're gonna bond this, or do we know yet?
At this point, we're planning to do a bank loan, but that is to be determined based on an interpretation from the legal department.
From legal? Yep, we probably wanna get that resolved sooner than later.
They had a deadline.
Had or have? Had or have?
They have.
Have, thank you, that's a little better.
I talked to Mr. Carpenters at length about the implementation, the management, the decision-making for Hansen System in particular. Why with the reorganizational decision that we just took into that group of services, why isn't IT stepping in and saying, we'll take that?
Well, that's a very good question, because at this point, we have recently initiated a study to evaluate all of the IT functions that are occurring throughout the city. And we are looking to see if it will be more effective to consolidate and bring all that into the IT shop and have it centrally governed. That study is in process right now as we speak. We expect to have the results from that by towards the end of the year. And that is absolutely a good question, and we've been asking that ourselves.
Your graph that shows employees dedicated to IT in the municipality at 5%, that's really not necessarily the case then, because there's other functions throughout the administration's decision-making that has IT functions built into individual departments. So that's the efficiencies that I'd like to see pursued, as well as ultimately, I'll go down the path as Ms. Oceaner is concerned. I like the capitalization of it all, but the uniformity of when we capitalize and when we just internalize, I think has got to be talked about from our perspective as well, so we're not confused that, hey, this is a big capital program, 13 million sounds like a lot of money, but I don't know what the price tag is on Hansen so far, and we're still talking another module, another module, another module. When do we capitalize, when do we internalize just operational spending? I think we need to know as a decision-making body a little clarity to that, so, specific to Hansen System, but more globally to the when you apply that capital program and when does IT get the lead on it. That's my challenge, and I appreciate the summary of that study or whatever in a longer term answer, written summary question, if you wouldn't mind, for this budget process. Thank you. Mr. Horman?
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Starr, on that, along that line. For me, IT particularly tends to be a big target when you talk budgets and where can we either contract out or where are we spending, because it appears, if I'm not mistaken, am I correct, that IT budget largely is IGC money transferred from other departments internally? The labor costs coming in from the okay. So my question is that are we right sized? And so I would like to see, and I'll probably work with you offline to get the question phrased properly, but similar sized cities, similar sized departments, are we on par with an IT? IT is important. We have information technology. The public demands it. It's moving in that direction. There's no sense in trying to pretend that it isn't. So my question is, are we right sized? And an example would be at the PD where, with the advent of the MDCs, their IT department didn't grow in numbers by people, but yet their equipment and hard drives and hardware equipment actually grew exponentially. And so I guess what I'm saying is are we in the right size? And while I appreciate efficiencies in new programs, begs the question, and I mentioned it before, is, some of the things, in particularly your department, they're not important because they're essential functions. But for instance, I would say an assessor's office would have to be internal, but paying a check or paying a paycheck to a vendor or to an employee could be a function that could be processed outside the municipal service. So has any of that been looked at? And so I would work on offline with you with those questions, try to phrase it right. But these are some takeaways I'd ask for you to walk away with and kind of think through that process. Okay.
Jennifer, do you have something to add?
I just quickly, this might be unfair. Two from the past administrations was Hanson and the web. And have we seen any efficiencies, or has the new website provided us with what we were looking for? Or am I the only idiot out there?
I can answer for the website, for sure. What the website has done is it's provided us a platform where we can deliver online services fairly quickly, and we've been able to do that. With the old environment, we would not have been able to do that.
And it's just the user friendliness of it might be a personal problem.
No.
Debbie wants to add to
No,
that.
it isn't,
I
because
have a 9-year-old neighbor.
we were gonna get savings in publicizing meetings
Yeah.
because of the web thing. And we were gonna get a report back on that to show how efficient we were being at publicizing meetings,
Yeah.
remember?
I mean, there have been I've seen some aspects of it in some departments that have used it effectively, and you can, reports that have come out have been put on, but I guess it's been variable, and as I say, some of it has been hard to search.
Yeah.
We'll have assembly training sessions.
Did you, Brady?
Well, we can definitely take your input on what these areas are and we can improve those.
I just had a comment
Add to it.
in the peanut gallery. I have a 90-year-old neighbor who wants the muni to go back to paper. I'm fighting her off every day, I guarantee you, so just so you know what I'm up against.
And then maybe this is just when you have the opportunity to pay your property taxes with a credit card, we pay an outside agency to manage that transaction. Why doesn't the municipality allow credit card transactions for a charge like that?
We use an outside agency. In order to take that in-house, we would have to have a security rating that's very hard to obtain. It's typical for organizations to outsource that because that rating is maintained by the outsourcer. It would be very hard for us to comply to that and to maintain compliance.
I just see the security system upgrades in the budget speaking to that. That wouldn't cover that, obviously, to get to that level of transactions.
It would not.
All right, thanks. Anybody else? Thank you. Yeah.
Purchasing. We have 13 full-time positions. Our savings that are indicated, the difference is going to be a result of one person being part-time, that person will be myself. And that is for savings in 2011. However, those savings will also be passed on in 2012 because with a new ERP system, we will more than likely lose one position just due to efficiency in processing of purchase orders, data input on requisitions. So that $80,000 will again be saved in 2012. We have realized savings already in the use of e-commerce, using of the web page, reducing advertising, postage, mailing, etc. There will be no reduction in services for 2011 from our office. We do not serve the public directly. We support the other departments, and our goal for 2011 is to become more efficient in that area, and I believe with the new ERP system we will do so. goal in being more efficient, of course, is to reduce lead time on purchasing. And one of our later charts indicates how well we're doing right now on small purchases. That's anything under $50,000, which we have direct control over. Those purchases over $50,000, I do not have direct control over due to limitations in the code, as well as assembly approval requirements. And individual departments are involved in the negotiation of most of our contracts as a result of requests for proposals. We are expanding our P-card program. We've increased some of our limitations up to $4,000 per P-card, and we are seeing benefit from that. We will also see benefit in revenue because we do get about 1% back on all expenditures on our P-card.
Can I just talk about that for a second? It would be great if we got airline miles too, but that doesn't happen. What I'm concerned about is the audit that took place a couple of years ago that talked about perhaps a misuse of those cards or a policy that wasn't clear in that way. As you expand that opportunity to do that, what are your measures of systems control for how to manage the purchases and the use of the P cards?
Well, first of all, we're very selective in who we give that increased dollar value to. And right now, the only ones we're giving it to is vehicle maintenance and other maintenance operations where the individuals are ordering materials for their maintenance operations. And so we've increased up to $4,000 for AWW and their operations, our vehicle maintenance people, transit for vehicle maintenance. And it's primarily because they are going out and buying some fairly large pieces of repair equipment. And it allows them to do that without having to wait to go through our office with a requisition.
How much fuel transfers through the P card system? Do you allow fuel purchases?
We, bulk fuel, yes. And we have a special card set up for that, and it does not have a dollar limitation. And we do have a contract. We are just actually processing it through the P card system.
Employees using P cards for filling up their vehicles when they're on the road, that doesn't happen through that system then?
No, it does not. They actually have a card that's assigned to the vehicle.
Right, under the card lock program with Tesoro or whatever.
Right, they're not supposed to use their P card for that.
Are P card issuances going up or down? What's the trend? How many do we have out there, and are they going up or down? And if we know, great. If not, you can answer it later. But
we actually have less P cards out today than we did last year at this time. Not by a great amount, 50 P cards.
How many cards are out there?
You're asking a question I don't have the answer for.
Maybe you could just tell me that later.
I can do that.
Thank you.
However, Mr. Starr, one of the goals is to expand the program.
I understand. Go ahead, Ellen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, do we still get a fee for using the credit card, right, from the credit card folks?
Correct.
What is
1%
that?
is
It's still
based upon
1%?
the dollar amount that we spend.
Right.
And right now it's 1%.
Right, and so we can't get both miles and the 1%?
No, we do not have an airline mileage card.
No, I don't think you're smiling, but I don't,
No.
I'm very serious because I work
I
for the city of Accutan and we get miles. Of course, we're a much smaller city than the municipality of Anchorage. But, is it something we could look into?
It is something we can look into. At the present time, we have a contract, and it is perpetual, and we renew it each year, basically. So, can we approach them and ask? Yes, we can.
I would like for you to approach them and ask.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At time of renewal, we'll do
Jennifer,
that.
go ahead.
Thank you.
You brought up something when you were talking about the P cards that perked my interest, and you mentioned AWW. And it was my understanding that they have their own purchasing department. And so you do cooperate, or is there any way of creating efficiencies between the two of you, or have you started looking at that, or is that part of the
That's a
Oh, that
multiple
one.
question. Yes, we do. We do administer the P-card program. AWW, of course, has input for their use. And it's my understanding they are increasing their use of the P-card system. As far as other efficiencies, yes, we have actually, we communicate back and forth. They have taken some of our annual contracts recently And because they are primary user, example, plumbing supplies, they put that bid out this year. We have the ability to attach to it, same as they have the ability to attach to our contracts, all of our term contracts. So we do cooperate in that area quite a bit. They're looking at the other one right now for office supplies, assisting us in that area.
Thank you.
Debbie?
As you know, we spent a lot of time a few years ago with the Cooperative Purchasing Authority, and we were gonna get all these great savings, and we were gonna go away from P cards. Is there anything left of that in terms of joint purchasing ability with any entity? It was with the state, at least, I thought.
We attach to many contracts, and you see those, we call them cooperative purchase or piggybacking. Many of the contracts written by government agencies have the ability for us to attach directly. Those that do not, we call it piggybacking because we coordinate with them, we coordinate with the contractor, and there's an agreement that they will sell to us under the same terms and conditions. We always bring those to the assembly on anything over $50,000. That's required by code.
Mr. Trainee?
On the bottom one, the last one that says increased revenue in surplus sales via increased use of e-commerce and auction contract. The auction companies we have a contract with do that now over the internet. Are you improving that somehow beyond what they're doing? Because I know the ones, for example, that sell our cars, our guns, things like that, they do many cases over the internet sales.
They do internet sales. We also utilize eBay on certain specialized vehicles that come through, police impounds, etc. We will actually go out on eBay and obtain bids. We've sold motorcycles, nice Corvette, some very nice vehicles.
Good.
So
Corvettes,
we do that.
You got interest now. And don't forget, they're gonna raise the fees to register.
No problem.
That seems to be working pretty well. I checked with one of the auction companies that has a contract, and they say they sell a lot of the items over the internet, and they take all the responsibility as a federal licensed dealer for the gun transactions, so.
That is correct. We
We
built
get
it into
cash
the
out of it.
contract this year, this last year when we renewed the contract.
That's all.
And nicely done transitioning from Mr. Malden too. I appreciate the lack, there wasn't any hiccups. It seemed like it all had continuity and confidence in the purchasing program. So compliments to you for stepping in and learning the systems and leading and directing.
He's been there a long time.
I understand that, but there's nobody higher in that department right now, so thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome. Stepping lightly on
The next chart relates to cost of our operation in comparison to dollars expended. And you'll note that we exceed, or I should say our cost is less than best in class, based upon a national study. And I think that is primarily because we've been shorthanded this last year. So we should raise up there close to the best in class, hopefully less than median in the near future. Once again, number of days for receipt of requisitions, issue of purchase orders. We're averaging somewhere between 10.6 and 11.3 days over the last 6 months. And we hope to improve that. That is, again, small purchases only for those under 50,000. That concludes my presentation.
Mr. Donovan, go ahead.
Just an overall quick question, and I'm not sure which section would be, but when we're talking invoicing, and you got on here, Mr. Coleman, I appreciate the days for the receipt and requisition section. What's the average time, does anybody, I guess, in the section, from a bill or an obligation being made and a bill being invoiced and a bill being paid? Is anybody tracking that?
That would be accounts payable, but there are several things. Number one, the policy is to use net 30.
Net 30.
Net 30 is what we put into all of our contracts unless a contractor gives us a time payment discount. And we won't honor time payment discounts, anything greater than 10 days. We honor those contractually. And we take it into consideration in evaluation of bids. So as far as the actual time, I will let Dave answer that.
I don't have that data, but we track it in our system, so if you want to have it for something.
Thank you. I'm just, the reason I'm curious is I know that obviously when it comes to Mr. Starr, and I share with him, as closely as we can get, especially towards the end of the year, in the fourth quarter, knowing what our obligations are, what is being paid, and, you know, kind of where our balance is gonna zero out or close to.
Right, we go through a pretty detailed process at the end of the year to capture all our receivables, all our payables, working with the departments and working directly with our vendors, so I'm confident that we'll have that at the end of the year. I can get you data on days of invoices in the system.
Thank you.
Yeah, directly to Mr. Honeman and CC Barbara on that, so we can have that collectively as well. LV, did you have something to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just really quick question. Do the days, do they include weekends? Is it business days or are weekends included in the days that it takes to get a purchase or purchase requisition to a PO?
Your chart.
Yeah. I'm sorry, am I not being clear?
You're asking about what it.
Yeah.
How is
Okay,
it
the number
measured?
of days from receipt of a requisition to issue a PO, is it business days or the
No, that
weekends?
is calendar days.
Calendar days, right.
Yes.
And now I'm gonna give you a compliment. Based on when I was working with municipality, this is a really good improvement, so thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's wrap it up so we can take about a 5-minute break and transition departments. You guys did very well. Thank you for consolidating and all the things that you did. It was nicely done. Oh, no.
Ron.
She's done to every single
Yeah, right. And I but now I'm realizing this is what I want to do. So who would it be? Sorry, we got it. Yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna do the whole, everybody.
No, I'm doing a good job doing it. I know we're gonna have some reorganization. Peter, do you have a chance to meet today? Just you look great over here.
That's about what I did.
You got any plans for yourself? Thanks.
Okay, Diane?
Hey, 2 minutes, guys, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
All right,
Let
bye.
you guys know.
Okay.
We also have
I want to hear
one.
from the public. I want to hear from the public.
No, but this is a work session.
I mean, I love
I want to publish this thing.
Maybe I could
I'm
run a
gonna
meeting
be,
at
I'm gonna
night.
be running the thing, so.
No, but if we move the action item to budget and finance, I don't know if you're saying to do that. but I do want
Mr. Weaver, come and join
Yeah,
us.
you need to take the long plus the
No,
ramifications across.
but you're gonna.
I didn't understand the nuance on the automotive stuff. Implementation. Yeah, well, are we burying it in a bigger bill just so we don't have to deal with it next year? Or could we do it Well, the IM fees will administration stuff next year.
I think it's actually reasonable. I've got
Yeah.
it.
You should see how much they charge in other states.
Probably not for some.
People
I get
register.
away, I used to register, I was Indiana.
You see Oregon plates in a lot of states, because they're like $5, you know, but we don't want to get into that.
I don't have many.
Do what you got to do till those exams. Yes.
Mine is older.
Property taxes.
Yeah.
Even.
I've got a son in Spokane.
It's a good story.
I'll talk to you.
We're taking a turn break, and then we're
Dealing with cement trucks, we're paving. All my
I
curb.
realize that sodas actually do expire.
So does what?
Expire. This one expired in August.
I didn't know that.
You made it back?
The diner, they didn't even present the assembly.
Diner tastes funny.
The assembly.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's okay, I forgot.
Annual every.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Okay, 1 minute.
So, no matter what you do, you know?
You'll see it, no, I wrote it. Yeah, it was very interesting.
Captured a lot.
Take the one away from the others. It's got SPs.
No, no, because I forgot.
Ready, Mr. Chairman?
Okay, here we go. Folks, can we kind of wrap it up in the back for conversations?
I'll do it. Yeah, I'm on the way.
We're done, I'm gonna announce it. Remind me if I forget. Which I don't know
Running
how.
now.
Okay, Peter, here we go.
Okay,
All things audit.
the budget reduction by department, I think we can absorb internally. We're reducing some expenditures on computers. Every year, we seldom spend our budget because we kind of live very frugally. So we can absorb it this year.
Are you fully staffed right now, Peter?
Yes, I am.
Does that mean you're gonna let somebody go?
No,
Okay,
no impact on anything.
I got you.
Plus, we're gonna have some opt-out of our health insurance plan. That will save the department's money. So we'll have at least one person opting out. We measure our mission by the number of audits we do and the number of special studies we perform. So we're kind of remaining flat on the number of audits. And that's not the max I can do a year. I could play games and do some small audits, but that doesn't accomplish anything, so I think it's a good criteria level for us. For special studies, The big bump in '08 was the labor contract getting priced out. So I think we're down to a reasonable number of special studies for the Assembly and the mayor. We also measure effectiveness for audits by number of non-concurrences we get. So we've got a pretty good track record of being able to do audits that the management agrees with instead of fighting us on it. And every year we provide 1,200 hours to the external audit, saves money for the assembly, for the city.
Have you got the assembly audit plan in the works yet, or what's our input opportunities
We
for
put that
that?
out back in November, December timeframe.
So you'll have factored that in with your work plan?
Yes. That's it.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Elvie didn't have any comments, I guess, because she's not here, but I appreciate your work on their independent confidence. It's nice to have you working there.
Thank you.
Diane, so Health and Human Services, you can see that we are having an increase in the budget. The big increase you'll see comes from us moving community service patrol from fire to DHHS. We'll talk about that a little bit. But the other thing that you should know about our department is that we are approximately 50% grant funded. So while you will see that 54 full-time, 8 part-time positions, we have an additional 72 full-time, 21 part-time positions funded by grants or other sources. The savings include a vacant position in food safety and sanitation, which has been vacant for some time, and clinical services vacant position. This is an administrative position that we're deleting. And then we had a position that was a systems change coordinator, but since hiring the homeless coordinator, we have moved that person to a division manager, and other pieces of her duties we are splitting up to other parts of the department, and so we are cutting the 50% that is operating funded, and so reallocating some duties there.
Mr. Horniman, did you want to?
Mr. Johnson was first.
Okay, go ahead.
Just quickly, with the vacant position in food safety and sanitation, and periodically we have a lot of emails about that. Does that make any difference as far as timeliness of service, or timeliness as far as inspections?
What I would say is that we have noticed a little bit of decrement there, but at the same time that we're doing this, we are rolling out to staff a dashboard system that's real-time online, and that gives them a good kick in the butt, so to speak, to really be paying attention.
On the dash.
Yeah, kick in the dash, to be paying attention to the PVRs that we've monitored, so it's really something that they are seeing on a daily basis. It's in their face. And my feeling is that perhaps people have gotten a little complacent. If this is the wrong decision, then what I will do is make a different decision and come back to you at first quarter and say, I made a wrong decision and we need to cut somewhere else. But I think that that training and working and looking and really, the person who's now the division manager there has a background in efficiencies, has worked for big companies in efficiency and streamlining, and she's doing some incredible work. So I feel comfortable about the cut. You never know if it's going to work out the way you want.
That's fair.
That's
Thank
too
you.
long-winded, I'm sorry.
Mr. Holman?
Well, and I'm sorry I missed a little bit of that, so I'm assuming Ms. Johnson asked about the food safety sanitation position. And from the public safety standpoint, I eat out a lot. So selfishly, I have to tell you, I don't know how many people are actually conducting food and health inspections in restaurants.
I could look that up for you.
I don't have it, but if you can, that's fine before the end of the presentation. I could go back to that, but and I don't see this here, but is there? I think at one of the public safety committee meetings you had asked, are there any losses or declination in? I see a -7. Are there any losses in the child care safety inspections, like at either commercial enterprises or at a home-based daycare? Are there any inspectors that are positioned?
Child care licensing is mostly fully funded through the grant. Last year, not in this year's budget, but in last year's budget, we deleted a position and later decided that we wanted to restore that because of, for homelessness reasons. And we did delete some pieces in child care inspections. We are still doing better in terms of closing complaints and overall management of the child care program. I think that we are running quite a successful program in terms of child care licensing. Okay, so then if you look on the next page, you'll see that one of the.
There was one question related to that.
Before we go forward, thank you. I'd like to,
It's nice to know you guys care about my department.
of course we do. You know I care about it. Back to the food safety and sanitation vacant position. You said it's been vacant for some time.
More than
How long
a
is
year.
that? More than a year, okay. How often do restaurant eating places have to be, is it an annual inspection, every other
It's at
year?
least annual, and it depends on the type of risk of the location. So, for example, if you are selling food at the Saturday market and you're a temporary vendor, you have we might consider you to have a higher risk, and so we have people out working every weekend. If you are a place that is selling pretty much prepackaged foods, you're a lower risk. So it depends really on the level of risk, what kind of food you're taking, and that all gets designated when you apply for and get a certificate.
So what happens if I'm operating a restaurant and it's time for my annual inspection and it's not done on time? Do I have to shut down?
No.
Do I face fines?
No.
So are there no consequences for not?
There's not a consequence for you not, if you don't get your inspection done on time, because that's on us to do it on time. There's a consequence for us giving poor public service, and if there were not to be, that would be a poor public service. But there's not a consequence for you as a restaurant person. There's a consequence for you if you don't renew your fees, if you don't pay your fines. There's a consequence for you if we inspect you and you have critical violations or other violations and you don't remedy it. But there's not a consequence for you that says, oh, the food didn't come, they didn't come by and inspect me.
So it's driven by you. You,
Right.
just as the department,
Right,
say it's time for your inspection. I don't have to say, hey, it's time for my inspection, come
Right.
and inspect me.
and we have a list, and we have people, and we rotate people throughout, and they have a district, and we move them every so many years so they don't get too cozy with their friends.
So the next question is, we talked about property appraisal, and they are under a requirement, under a certain time frame to reappraise every property within the municipality. Are we meeting that annual inspection goal? Are you getting to everyone every year, or how are we?
I believe we are getting to everybody every year, but I would need to double check that. We tend to do more rather than fewer than what's required. Anchorage has a very good track record with restaurants. Not all restaurant owners appreciate that. If you call us, we take complaints seriously. If you look, all that information is online. You can look it up. You can see it was a regular inspection, it was an opening inspection, it was a re-inspection, it was a complaint. But we try to do all means of follow-up.
If you could give me those statistics on where we
Sure.
are in the annual
I
inspection,
will.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Diane, would your agency be responsible if there's an outbreak at a cruise ship that's now docking at our facility, or whose responsibility is that?
We have 9 people in food safety and sanitation. Thank you, Jenny. Cruise ships are under federal control until they dock, and then we would work with the state about the cruise ships are required to report if they have a certain amount of gastrointestinal illness. Generally, it's norovirus.
To you or to the state and
To the
feds?
state and feds, and then the state would work with us about meeting the cruise ship, dealing with ill passengers. Generally, our food safety and sanitation folks visit all the hotels and so forth at the tourist season, just to remind them about norovirus, remind them about cleaning, make just our friendly little calls, here's some brochures, here's some information.
Well, just be cognizant of when we start assuming state responsibilities that we somehow bill them for them, because it's a nice growing industry trend, but, you know, we don't expend your labors accordingly, so. I had a couple more questions, but go ahead, Mr. Bonham.
Just something that you may not have it handy, I know that you got giving it a piece of paper. Those 9 positions, those that actually go to the field to inspect, is there a way to get, and not today necessarily, but how many, and like from, I'm assuming Girdwood to include, or past, and within the boundaries, how many restaurants are they responsible for inspecting? So thank you.
Maybe just an outline report to the rest of the assembly body on terms of that, too. Like, you know, there's a couple people who have an interest in that, so maybe broadcast that to all of us. Thank you.
And that program is becoming nearly revenue sustaining. So, are we done with this page?
Yeah, there was another hand, sorry. Debbie, is it pertinent?
Well, it's not listed, so I'm not sure. The fees and fines show an increase in fees for fire inspections. And as you know, I've talked to you several times about childcare homes and childcare centers. I'm reading through this and it's a little hard to determine. I guess the hourly fee is what would impact childcare homes. Have you looked at this?
I think you need to talk to the fire department. I don't know.
Okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna ask you, before we adopt this, when we actually vote on it, I'm gonna ask you what you think, what your staff thinks the impact will be for childcare homes in particular and childcare centers. Because I got a lot of complaints from childcare homes on fire inspection costs in the past. So I'm just curious about that later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Somebody's waving their hand.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
it was me. It's a compliment in terms of the on-time piece. As somebody heavily involved in the Greek Festival that feeds thousands of people on one August weekend, the health department has always been on time and never has delayed the opening of the festival. And there have never been any illnesses, but the chef, the food service people just say that the health department is a pleasure to work with. So that's.
I had a question about the capital improvement or the capital request for a cemetery out to Eagle River. Are you kind of aware of that community request? And we would help to get the legislative priorities to reflect that.
Mr. Chairman, that is one of the items on the list that the mayor's going to be reviewing as he develops his recommendations, so.
In the course of the input from the assemblies as it relates to the bigger program?
The legislative.
Okay. I had another question as related to your ability to handle the air quality issues in Anchorage as we start to transition away from the IM program. Particularly as it relates to monitoring of wood smoke, your concerns a year or so ago with the wood smoke monitoring, and then as we have other requirements, Mr. Trainee announced again the state's going to relieve us of responsibility of some of this stuff. CO2 monitoring year round, that kind of stuff. Are you thinking ahead in that budgetary stuff?
I'm hoping I'm going to get some of that vehicle tax money. I mean.
The airplane tax one.
I would say that we will need not a small air quality program. We've always known that. Air quality is something that's in the municipal thing, in the municipality's code. It's one of the most used programs of the city. It's on every newscast, the air quality of the city. It's on the pollen. And I can tell you, right now, everybody might love whales, but not everybody loves fog. And we have spent a lot of time just dealing with that. So, I mean, in terms of things that the city is really concerned about, air quality is, I think, an important public health function. So as we transition away from IM, I will continue to advocate. I have been strong about that with the administration, that we need some air quality program. What that looks like and how much it costs to maintain that, I don't know.
Changes to your program in that department this year, or is the budget
There are
pretty?
no changes to our program this year.
Okay.
Because as you know, the EPA has 12 to 18 months, although the governor is asking for it to be prioritized, and then the assembly asks for 6 months after that. So, and I think you probably know the federal government is revisiting the CO2.
Well, as you see unfunded mandates coming down to your desk level, be sure you advise us of those so we can stay abreast of what our funding needs are going to be in the future. Mr. Trainee?
I just enjoyed the comment on air quality. Pollen is a concern, but I don't remember SUVs causing pollen.
No.
Sorry.
I understand that. I mean,
It was an editorial comment.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there's
Editorial
no
comment.
necessary.
Can we move on to
Yes,
the
you
next
can.
slide? Mother, may I?
Please do.
Patrick has to
Yes,
finish
sir.
there.
Well, it's on air quality, the mold counts we do not do in the winter, is that correct?
That's correct.
What would it take to do that?
It would take more money probably than we have right now.
I guess more specifically, what's the technical requirement for the mold? I gotta inquire about it. so
Maybe
I'm-
just give us an answer later,
Yeah.
or Patrick direct maybe.
Yeah, that'd be good. And also, in your next slide, you talk about reduction in community grants. So, if you can get us one of them specifically you've got in here is you're gonna reduce funding to project access.
Yes.
We appreciate some perspective on
Why?
what the other funding sources are that we expect to be there.
Okay, so if you look at the next slide, you will see that 4 of our public health nursing positions are being shifted to the state grant. It's long been our contention that the state funds public health nursing fully everywhere else in the state, and it should fund it fully here. So they gave us an additional $500,000 last year in July. We held that money back and told them that we would think about whether we wanted to continue after December 31st, and we have agreed to continue until June 30th. That gives them another legislative session to come up with some additional funding. We haven't drawn a line in the sand. I still believe that public health nursing should be done at the local level. I think that's important, but it gives us still some more leverage. And so we're hopeful that they will come through with some additional funding. And our goal is to get that paid for either via revenue or state funding, and with the minimum amount of city money possible. It may take a few years, but that's my goal. Grants to nonprofits have been reduced. That includes youth court and the youth restitution program, as well as $20,000 reduction to Project Access. Project Access has quite a healthy budget. They get a $250,000 grant from the state every year to do their program. I think Project Access is a worthy program, and I think that if the city wants to fund them, I think that they, like other worthy programs, should compete with the municipal manager's office as a community grant. We have a process,
But you cut that too.
Huh?
But you cut that too.
I didn't. But I just think that, everybody has a good cause. And I think Project Access is a good program, and it does a lot of good work, but so do other things.
Okay, so when you say supported by other funding sources, you mean they have other funding sources, but there's no appreciable increase that we're aware of at this time?
Not at this time, but I also know that they are doing fairly well financially.
Thank you.
Clinical services, vacant position deleted, 73,000.
Jennifer, did you need to ask now?
Just the grants that you mentioned, youth corps, will that be picked up by the Parks Foundation or what's?
Excuse me?
The youth corps?
Court.
Oh, court,
Youth
youth
court.
court, okay, never mind. Thank you for your comments on Project Access.
Mr. Honeman?
I already talked about that.
But it says, just a quick question, it has a reduction for the Project Asset Grant. What, would that zero them out, or would they still be some funding?
I thought it was 25 last year, but
It was 20 last
20,
year,
okay.
after all
So
the
it's zeroed
said
out.
and done. It was zeroed, and then you put it back in for some, and then it was negotiating at 20.
And as Diane said, Mr. Chair, the goal is to really put all those types of grants into the community grant program, so there is consistency in how they're both evaluated and applied. And this one really came under the category of earmark, if you will. They came and lobbied the assembly, and and it really took go through a process.
The CST contract is transferred from fire. The reason that we did that is, as you know, we've been designated the lead department for homelessness issues, and we just think that having CST as part of Health and Human Services, God help us, will help us be able to leverage more and do some different things where it is a major part of our mission in terms of moving forward on some of the mayor's initiatives around the homeless co-opting the chronic public need, those with significant mental health issues co-opting public space. So
The Downtown Partnership, has that group, since they've expanded their boundaries now, have they reapproached you with another program
we're
level?
working with them on Change for the Better. We're also, we're working on a number of initiatives. We just met with the mayor this week, and he's responding to the recommendations, and we anticipate getting the group back together in November, and this season being more of a work group season for the chronic public inebriate, the leadership team.
They're a different player now with an expanded budget and expanded territory downtown in particular.
And I think too, I think they're interested.
Good, thank you.
So our mission is to protect and improve the public health and well-being of all people in Anchorage. Kind of a womb to tomb mission. We start at the beginning with things, and some people suggest that we have some things in our budget that are just kind of there because they're well placed. But these are just a few of the many goals. I had the opportunity, and I appreciate it, to speak to Mr. Honeman and the Public Safety Committee about the real depth and breadth of what public health does, or that we're more than flu shots. In fact, we're very little about flu shots. But we're interested in, we have a large role in disaster preparedness and emergency preparedness. We are interested in improving responsiveness to public health complaints, whether that be people getting a shot, a TB test, coming in to get a food permit, calling because they're concerned about childcare. And the one that interests and excites me probably a lot is the increasing community and agency partnerships and public health initiatives. For example, one of the great outgrowths of the time that we spent on H1N1 is that the school district now has developed the capacity to start giving immunizations. And I've been contacted by it's a zoo at back to school time, kids getting immunizations. And I've been contacted by the head of school nursing about getting together and talking about how we might send teams of nurses to school on a rotating monthly or so often basis to get kids to get their shots so that it's not a big zoo for parents and kids at the end of the summer. So that's been one, and working on family homelessness. The United Way recently raised $35,000 for assistance to families, and we're working in a partnership with the community about how that will be given out. And it's not all about building government, but about building community capacity.
Well, the nurses all have to they have to produce community education outreach hours, so you've got a tremendous resource with licensed nurses in this.
So in terms of accountability, we're looking at how long it takes us to resolve child care complaints. The number used to be really high, and then we had an audit, and it's much lower. And we're working on that even more diligently. I think you'll see a big improvement in 2010. And if you look, the other one is the percent of food establishments inspected with fewer than 2 critical items. So the lower that number, the better. So the goal would be to keep that number. If we're not succeeding with the number of inspectors, then we're going to be seeing that going up because we're not going to be getting to places in a timely way and educating them and bringing people into compliance. And then finally, we house under a grant program an Aging and Disability Resource Center for the state, which is fully funded by the state. And we do a client satisfaction survey, and so this is a relatively new program in the last year and a half, but here's a little bit of a client satisfaction that you can look at. And one of the nice things about this is that it helps us with the senior centers, and we've even moved the cemetery under human services, because I think there is a lot to do around taking care of elders and attracting our elders to this community and families who really find themselves in crisis. And not that we just want to sell you a plot or anything, but they're really thinking about it's a continuum of care. And we have the senior centers, and we have end of life, and we have people who really need help with families. And when we're so far away and we want to grow our economy, having people be able to bring their parents here, and being able to really work on having services for their families is really important to the whole continuum. So that's our department. Thank you.
Ms. Drummond, did you have your hand up?
No.
Just, it would be good to see, maybe add a goal to the public health division. I'd like to see some sort of plan by mid-year as to how we're gonna transition the air quality monitoring program without the IN. Funding it, what it'll look like. You know, we have nibbled around the edge of this long enough, we're gonna need to know what we're gonna do, and plan for it. I don't think we need to do it until 2012. I'd rather not be surprised at this time next year.
Okay. Do that.
I just, on the food establishments, what's an example of a critical violation?
Well, say
I
for.
almost hate to ask.
Ignorance is bliss.
One thing you should, for example, we've gone into places before and people are like storing the meat on the floor and cutting the meat on the floor. That's not good. Sewage backing up in the kitchen, that's not good.
You can send Mr. Birch more examples of that. All you want. Thank you for-
Something that would cause an immediate concern about health or safety, would be, a critical violation.
Raisins that aren't really raisins.
Thank you.
Okay, Karen.
For the library, our administrative efficiency savings, probably our biggest was this automated renewal and notification services. This is a software program that we purchased with grant funds actually, and it allows us to see a return on investment in about 18 months. It'll reduce us having to send out mailings and so forth to notify people about their library accounts. Another thing that we did was we reduced the courier services from 6 days a week to 5. And some of the cause or payer things was this fee for interlibrary loan requests. We instituted, we'd always never charged for those. We charge now just to help recoup the cost of postage. Doesn't pay for the service, but it does help to cover some of the costs. We've also raised fines and fees for printing, and actually we're more in line with retail establishments now. If you were to go to Kinko's, because I was actually told by someone that they would run over to the library to get their printing done after they've been at Kinko's because it's cheaper to come to the library. So we raised it up and we're at the same price as Kinko's now. And then we've also instituted a rate structure for our room rentals. However, our room rentals have not gone up significantly this year because we're still working with, and when we get to the capital improvements projects, we're still working with some very outdated equipment, particularly in the Golden Marston Theater, the audio equipment. And so it's not very, it's an attractive space, it's just outdated, so we really need some improvements there, and that's one of the reasons there's capital requests that we have. The budget highlights is essentially, this budget scenario requires us to close the Sampson Diamond Branch Library. That would be an elimination of 5 positions. The Mountain View Branch Library, of course, we opened up at the end of September, and the money that's used for the staffing for that, we're using that O&M bond money from the 2008 bond for that. The impacts that we anticipate will be that we'll see lots more traffic at LUSAC, and there will be just longer waits for services either in-house or
Ms. Gray Jackson had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, and maybe you can answer, maybe you can't. But what is the cost going to be to shut down the library?
to actually shut it down and to move it.
All labor, everything, what's it gonna cost us?
I'm guesstimating it'll be about $55,000.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jennifer?
As far as the elimination of providing telephone service, you still have like SLED and other IT programs that can be used for references, right?
Actually, it is. It's not only that it's not just in person, but we also provide information services online. That just didn't get changed in this. They can contact us by email and they can contact us in person. And yes, we do have databases if they don't need to speak to somebody directly. So it's just that we don't have the telephone that they can call up on. We were basically operating from like 10 in the morning till 6 at night, and it wasn't a full service. It wasn't the same number of hours anyway, so it's just eliminated that. And a lot of those calls happen to be for people that were doing things like renewals and placing holds and that kind of thing, which they can do online anyway, or now they can do it on phone. They just don't need a body to do it for them.
Mr. Birch?
Well, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for the tour of the facilities there, and you're doing a great job with a minimal budget, and hopefully we can see our way through this to get you the resources that you need. On the Sampson Diamond Library, obviously in South Anchorage, there's some discussion about Express Library, or any further developments on that, or is that?
Well, I don't know that there are any further developments. It was my understanding that it fallen apart.
Yeah.
I wasn't at the last.
I know there's some discussions with the property owner there about possibly making something happen.
Right, initially they had reduced our rent in 2009. They've reduced it by $10,000, and then there was another discussion that said that they were proposing to offer us rent-free, but then I think it was the utilities, they wanted at least the utilities to be paid.
And then you just stay in your existing space.
Right, they wanted us to stay, and the original one with rent-free was that we would move to a 3,500 square feet, and then they wanted us to stay where we were, and they also suggested the number of hours that we would be open and different things like that, and I think there was just a little bit of difference in how we could operate an express library under at least what they wanted to do.
Well, I for one just want to express my appreciation for what you're doing down there and the changes you've got to propose. Thank you.
So yeah, the reference services really will be, it did eliminate a position. That's where we found some of our cost savings, was because one of the people that was doing it was by retirement. He left, so we just didn't rehire in that position, and we're just able to let's assume it that way. Our mission is, we have lofty goals. We have a big mission. We deliver education, information, and enrichment for residents, and like the public health service, we get them coming and going at the very beginning and all the way, at least not through the tomb, but at least in their old age. The detail on how we achieve these group goals, the increased opportunities for children's success, for example, is in more detail in your PBR framework. I mean, we do that by teaching for children, for example. We teach the foundations of reading and social skills and creative skills through all the early learning educational activities that the library provides, both in terms of materials and educational classes. The civic engagement, cultural enrichment, and enhancement and quality of life issues, again, those are through the provision of educational services, which are the materials, the online resources that you mentioned, and many of the programs and events that we're providing. As an example, one of the things that we've been currently doing this year is a conversation salon about the Alaska Constitution. And on Tuesday night, we had high school, we had Dick Fisher in there to talk about the Constitution, and we had high schoolers in there. So an opportunity for these young people to listen to that kind of how that was developed and what that was important, I think is an important resource for our community. And then we improve economic advancement by providing equitable access to equipment and resources. And again, this is primarily for our computing services. Most employers, about 60% of employers now require online application. So people with those resources are looking for work and so forth. And people who are looking for work oftentimes need assistance on those when they're using online resources. And all of the studies that have been done both nationally and here in, there was a University of Washington study done, and also our friends in the library did a recent exit user survey. Most of the people who come to use the library for computing services do have computers at home. So it's not just the underserved or unserved that people come there for a lot, oftentimes because of the computer, the staff assistance that they get. And then on our—
I had a question about your volunteer utilization, and we had a conversation some time back about union contractual restrictions on what volunteers could actually do in the library in terms of contributions. Has there been any dialogue there to revisit the opportunity for the engagement of those volunteers?
Yeah, we've used volunteers, we have thousands of hours of volunteer services every year. And the restriction on the contract is that we can't let someone go and then hire someone to do the job that they were doing. We do use volunteers in some of they certainly come down and help with some of those tasks, shelving and putting books in order and all that kind of thing. But we've actually we've expanded our program to a number of other things to take advantage of retirees. They assist us with library programs, and they assist with some of the programs where we establish a huge docent program so that they can help us with, because a lot of the additional programs that we have to do is an additional amount of staff, so they'll help us develop programs and produce those, and those would be from everything from, children's programs up through adults programs. So we are expanding actually the role of our volunteers.
Do you have a program that works with the community hours and the court systems that requires community service contributions?
We use them a lot. In fact, that's how we moved the Eagle River Library.
That's what I thought, okay. Well,
We do that a lot. And in fact, one of the projects that we're involved in right now is the Downtown Rotary Club is funding for and creating a teen space in the Lusac Library. And we had to do a lot of shift shelving. I'm gonna be careful when I say that. We had to shift shelves up on the third floor. We used community service people to do all of that.
Okay, thank you. Debbie?
Well, just to amplify Mr. Starr, when we were talking about potential reductions in hours last budget cycle, my understanding is there were restrictions per labor contract on volunteers not being allowed to shelve or check out material. That's, I think, what Mr. Starr was talking about.
Right, they can check out materials because they would have access to the patron's account, and we can't allow them.
Can they show?
Yes.
Thank you.
So on our accountability, the measures that were there, again, the value of these services are more clearly explained. These slides tend to be somewhat brief and terse, so to understand what the value of these services are in terms of how they're reported back is, again, there's a direct correlation between investments in early childhood development programs. They can generate a cost ratio benefit of anywhere from 3 to 1, or almost $3 for every dollar invested. So those are the kind of value statements that go with offering these kinds of programs.
Mr. Trainee to this?
Just a question, Diamond Sampson being shut down, is that gonna reflect, is that reflected up now your projection on not offering that service at Diamond Sampson?
Right, we won't have it, obviously, if
So
the
it's not
library's not
factored in
open.
here?
No.
But you'll now have them at Mountain View, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
There'll be programs at Mountain View. I mean, we're essentially, we'll still have 4 branches open.
Okay, thank you.
Under accountability, again, the material expenditures per capita, and again, children's success at school is measured by the number of books in the home and the number of circulation at their library branches and in their number of card holders and everything. So the supporting documentation is more clearly defined in your PBR framework. The number of computers available for public use, similar kind of thing. Again, as I said earlier, over 90, some 90% of the people that come in to use the computers and the value of our services and so forth. We've provided almost, we have about 156,000 people who come into the library and use the computers every year. That's about 13,000 people a month to use the computer services. And if you were to calculate that value of that, and again, this is using Kinko's as an example, they charge $12 an hour. And if you calculate the number of computers that we have, the number of hours that we're open, the value of those resources is about $70,000 a week, or almost $3.5 million a year. And that's the kind of value the public gets on that.
Are you on the development team with the IT projects they're talking about? Are they consulting with you, or how would you see a consolidation in your IT functions?
There's a couple of projects, a couple of things that the IT department is doing for us that are going to help us. One of them is they're developing a room rental
an automated online program so that we can manage those better, the public can see what's going on. And when the assembly is at a meeting and Barbara wants to know if the rooms are available, we're not running downstairs with a slip of paper, so that'll help the assembly as well as all the other facilities. And the other program that they're developing for us is for us to track our statistics, the kinds of questions we're getting and when we're asking, so that we can figure out when are we busiest and where, so that we do better staff deployment, so that we can say, well, we don't need someone here, or we only maybe need 2 people, or 1 person at the desk at this time. Because
You handle your hardware maintenance and repairs internally in your own department?
No.
You outsource that to private industry or to the IT?
No, we have somebody from IT.
Okay,
We have
thank
1
you.
person to manage a network of about 125 machines, 1 person,
Patrick?
in 5 buildings.
Karen, on the, just briefly revisiting Sampson Diamond, what, if they, I guess the Diamond Center, the Ashlocks agreed, asked about waiving rents but maintaining utilities, what's the rent versus utilities in the, under the 30-some
The lease
thousand?
that was, and you'll see that when the Heritage Land Bank comes up, we were paying almost $135,000 a year for that.
For the space,
Uh-huh.
and they offered to waive that, but you didn't like the space that you're in?
Right, the offer was to not charge us rent for anywhere from 2 to 5 years, I think it was. And then later it was they wanted the utilities, but I wasn't privy to the I didn't know, Mary.
Help me out, yeah.
Through the chair. Mr. Flynn, originally, the idea that we discussed with them was to have an express library, as Mr. Birch described it. And that was to relocate it and primarily be computers. It'd be a smaller 3,500 square feet. We worked with Karen, she came up with a great budget and everything. But then over time, the commitment from the owners was that there would be no rent charge, but we would pay the utilities on the express library. Over time, from their perspective, it changed in that they wanted us to keep the current, 10,000 square feet, 12,000 square feet. We could not reduce any staffing, and we could still have the just computers there, but we would have this, and they wouldn't charge us rent. So that wasn't meeting the idea of the express library. So as a result, the discussions, we didn't reach agreement.
I would just encourage maybe one-on-one direct conversations if you're
Yeah.
moving towards a change there, but thank you. Jennifer?
As far as your library card holders per capita, you did I want to say a cleansing, but that's not the right word, but.
We did.
Purging, there we go.
We actually, and that was one of the other things that we did, is we have over 20 items that we did to try to improve efficiencies, and that was one of them. We used to you were allowed to keep a library card. So now if you haven't used your card in 3 years, we remove you from the system, so we did do that. And in fact, we purged that, and as of January 2010, we had 180,000 card holders. And so I'm very confident that those are people that have used that card within at least the last 3 years. So 180,000 card holders is 63% of the population have library cards. That's very high in comparison to our peer institutions. The norm, the average nationally is about 55%.
And as you're doing your efficiencies, can you, with your current system, get an idea of the usage of those 180,000 cardholders, how often they use it?
Yes.
And can
Yes,
we
and
have
in
some of
fact,
that offline?
Yes, I could get that to you. Statistically, I have anecdotal information, for example, from the Sampson Diamond Library, because our friends in the library did an exit user survey and stood there and asked people, they interviewed patrons when they walked out, and this one said 53% of those that go to the library once a week or more, and 47% go at least once or more per month.
But the breakdown of that 180,000, I mean, I think as you check out a book, I'm trying to think of how many times you use it in the library. I guess there's no way to find out the usage of that 180,000.
Circulation for registered borrowers listed at 8.07 in 2009.
Way to go, Patrick.
Page 14-6.
God, you're so far ahead.
Finally reading. Thank you.
And then finally, can I go forward? In terms of the capital budget, are we supposed to go there? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
The capital budget, a couple of things that we're gonna be going forward is the LUSAC indoor book drop. This is a personal passion of mine. We have an outdoor book drop and it's an incredible inefficiency in terms of we have to unload that thing every 2 hours. And that means an employee has to put on their coat, open up the door, take a cart, go across the freight driveway and load up 4 bins and bring them back in. Every 2 hours we have to do this. And in addition to just an inefficiency in terms of staffing and everything, it's just, I believe, a workman's comp issue on the MAG because they have to go do this in all kinds of weather and certainly during the icy winters and so forth. So I would really like to see that done. We have some very easily, I think, modifiable methods to do that, to create an indoor book drop at LUSAC. And in terms of our collections, we're going to go back and ask, and I think, again, one of the things, the Anchorage Public Library is a net lender in the state. I mean, we get requests from all throughout the state for our materials, and another example of this is we're belonging to one of those joint purchasing arrangements through the Alaska Library Network to do downloadable audiobooks, and all libraries pay a percentage of the money to belong, and there are a number of smaller libraries that would like to be in on it, so the state library is thinking about allowing them to come in and subsidize them to be able to join this. And yet Anchorage is the one that we put in our fee plus we purchase extra. So that, to me, this is a justification to get statewide monies, is because we'll add that to our collection, but it's still also available to everyone around the state.
Mr. Honeman?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your presentation, and I did also went to one of the tours there when it's, I can't remember the phrase, but when the Friends of the Libraries Party in the Park or whatever it was I remember there was some group and band there. It was actually a lot of kids and families. It was a real good event, and we actually beat some of the wet weather we were having this summer. My question when it goes to right side government, is there a standard or are there any data, and we certainly will get this at a later point, but are we right sized as far as number of libraries or number of, I guess, items, and I saw the numbers that you gave on the computers, but for instance, we have the main library and 4 branches currently, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And are we pretty comparable to either cities our size, or are there any statistics that show communities with some functional data that say that we're pretty much in the right path, or that we're under or overserved in the area of libraries?
In comparison to libraries of our size, we're under. The average would be more in the area of about 8 or 9 branch libraries in a community of our size.
And that data is somewhere that we can.
It's in our community plan. The community plan, they did a peer review of 35 peer libraries around the state, around the country, I mean.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron, a final question. The indoor book drop, will there still be a drive-up access point, or is it going to be moved entirely?
No, it would still be a drive-up.
Thank you.
And then finally, the LUSAC entrance renovation, of course, is something that we've been after for a couple of years now, and that entails removing the plaza, the second story, the walk up there, and bringing that down so that we'd have a first floor entrance. And the RFID is really one of those upfront big investments to try and have long-term benefits in terms of, I mean, most bookstores and other retail, you're familiar with it, it's just an inventory management system. We have over 700,000 items. We circulate over 1.5 million items a year, so you can understand that having an automated program like this would be very, very efficient for us.
Don't want to allocate time, but you got about 3 more, so 10 minutes apiece for that. Can you do it?
I think real estate can go fairly quickly, right, Bill?
I think so. Next slide. Real estate. As you know, the real estate department has been renamed and is a new department as part of a reorganization. Heritage Land Bank has now a division, and real estate services as a division. The two have a fiscal year budget in 2011 of $7,754,000 with 8 employees, 5 of which are HLP and 3 with real estate services. Of that budget, of the $7.7 million, 83% is IGC management to leases. So we manage $6,400,000 plus of leases throughout the municipality for various agencies. And but I might comment that two of those leases that dominate the entire numbers are City Hall and the Permit Center, accounting for $5.2 million of the entire lease budget. The next slide then.
Why don't you
Oh,
tell
you-
us the
well,
only reduction that you-
We've sort of talked about the Sampson Diamond library lease. This would impact a change to our lease objectives in 2011 and a reduction. It does reduce services for that particular area, as we've commented before.
Ms. Gray Jackson had a comment.
Are you done?
No.
Okay, when you're done,
Oh.
when you're done, when he's done, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Real estate accountability. Those real estate services provides property management and administers foreclosure processes and delinquent taxes and assessments. And we acquire and dispose of real estate property for all agencies throughout the municipality, and not just Heritage Land Bank inventory. Some of our goals for 2011 and ongoing actually is to maximize efficiency and minimize expense. I think you'll see from our budget that we have a tiger team that has a very small budget, and we maximize that budget to the limit. I like to refer to my real estate services department as revenue neutral and expense neutral, because we pay for ourselves each step of the way, and really I think we do a pretty good job. And Heritage Land Bank is a non-tax supported agency. It is an agency that of the municipality that has a varying budget and has a fund that has grown to as much as $5.5 million over the years, and been as little as $65,000 in certain years. We currently have a budget or a budget fund balance in our Heritage Land Bank of $1.2 million, almost $1.3 million in cash funds, with an additional $1.7 million in accounts receivable. So the current fund is just under $3 million in net assets. So Heritage Land Bank is recovering from a fairly lean period over the last few years. Next slide. This illustrates some of our foreclosure activities. I'm very proud of our
On that point, Debbie?
Yeah, just real quickly, do you invest that cash to maximize it? Is it just not just sitting in the bank?
In prior years, that the director in coordination with the chief financial officer have invested chunks of or blocks of money in different types of investment, generally bonds or longer term instruments. But in the recent years, we haven't had the discretionary income to do that. Most of our budget has been dedicated toward operating funds and recovery of a lean period. We have not also been able to rebuild our fund as quickly as possible because of the change in market. And the Heritage Land Bank only has the ability to increase its fund through land sales and or leases.
So
That answer your
if
question.
nothing else, a CD.
CD would be an instrument we probably could use if we could afford to dedicate funds for a long period of time, which maybe we will be able to.
Mr. Trainee?
No, the HLB doesn't have a program to sell Girdwood land, but are you pursuing leasing any land in Girdwood currently?
Most of the lands in Girdwood are unpatented lands to the municipality, which means that we have management of control, and we have obligations for the development of those lands. But frankly, most of the lands are in a status that cannot be leased because they're not tracked. They're
How about
not
the squirrel cages
subdivided.
down there?
Pardon?
Squirrel cage, there's zone down there in Girdwood?
Squirrel cage.
What's the
just-
status of those?
We just completed a land use study for the squirrel cage area. And that area has some very good potential for
So that could be
ground
leased
lease.
out or sold,
Could not be sold in its current status.
but it could be leased out?
It could not be leased in its current status.
Okay.
It needs to be subdivided and
I'll tell you
platted.
where it's at.
And we're in the pre-plat stage, and one of the objectives is to get to that point where we have something that we could actually lease. And, Mr. Weaver might make an additional comment on that if he has.
Is there anything else on that HLB land, squirrel cage specific?
We've worked with HLB over the past year to look at that and see how we can reconfigure it and put it into some usable kind of configuration. It's in process.
An individual, I'll send them to talk to you guys, because they approached me about would the city be interested in leasing the squirrel cage area out. So I'll send them to talk to you guys.
Sure.
Thank you.
One of the areas of responsibility for real estate services is to collect taxes. And we have approximately 2,500 accounts each year that become delinquent. And this last year, we had a leap in the total tax due for collection. It is approaching $10 million. Our objective is over a period of 36 months is to collect every penny of that, of those taxes. And we do. This last year, the prior year, we had $7 million in assessments that were uncollected. And then the prior year before that, 5. It's been a trend that's been growing, and I think reflects the economic times. We probably will see an increase again in 2011.
I asked the question actually to Treasury a while back on this question, and I didn't see this trend graph sent to me in terms of anticipated. Do we ultimately collect this money? I know you have a...
We collect 100 cents on the dollar, and we charge to those tax holders who are delinquent every dime that we assume an expense to collect that money.
Mr. Honeman?
My question is that you said around 2,500 properties a year that go into failure to pay, so foreclosure, past status possibly. That number that's reflecting the one that graph before where it's going up, is that a number based on the assessed value, or is it actually increase in numbers of units going into foreclosure?
It's the actual tax dollar.
So that number
Not
could
the
be.
value of the property, the
That
tax
number-
value.
So I guess, just to make sure I'm clear, that means that some of the properties in 2008 are now assessed at a higher amount in 2010, which could reflect the increase, or is it numbers of units?
Numbers of units. We have an increasing number of properties that are becoming delinquent.
And what's the increase? You said about 2,500 yearly?
At least 25% this last year.
So 25% of 25, okay.
Of 10 million. So you see the next slide, though. This indicates the actual process. After 3 years, we boil it down to the properties that we actually have to sell to regain our tax base. And this last year, we had 11 properties actually that we sold. We sold those for more than the tax that was due. Unfortunately, we don't get to keep that, quote, profit. It's returned back to the prior owners, if you can believe that.
I have a question to that effect, and then if we can't find them, does that money go to the state, or does that go into our city coffers?
The We can find them, and the money is retained by the municipality after, they only have 6 months to claim the money. And after that period, if it remains unclaimed, it goes into the general fund.
We have to give them the profits too?
That is our profit.
No, if we find the property owner, do we give them the profits?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
We charge them a commission?
I wish I could.
Well, if we sell it greater than the tax burden, no, there is.
What we recover are the taxes that are due and all of our expenses leading up to and including the foreclosure. Any excess funds are actually due to them. So any other questions?
Okay, we'll move on to public works.
Excuse me, I have
Are
a
you done?
comment. Yeah.
Go ahead, tell me what to add, please.
So, I hear that you're gonna be leaving the municipality, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for your service. And I've had the opportunity to work with you on a couple of issues, and I really appreciate you, and I'll miss you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
News. Thank you for that.
Yeah, welcome. After all that, we have a small budget of $103 million.
I'm gonna balance your time for 10 minutes, so I know this one's gonna be issue related, so we can either decide to go long or not, so.
That's all right. We'll condense it down, try to get it informative as I can, and I can answer any questions in the future. You can give them to me, and I can put them in writing and try to get them down to you.
And just CC the clerk when that happens, would you?
Sure.
Thank you.
Not a problem. With this Public Works, everybody knows that for the past couple weeks, you guys have been reorganizing us and allowing us to be reorganized. But the gist of it is that maintenance and operations, traffic, PM&E have combined back together. They were together years ago. We believe there's a lot of efficiencies with that, and moving forward, we also pulled in when OCPD ended. We brought in the 1% for Arts program into the Public Works budget. So it's been a summer worth of trying to combine 3 departments into one and then present it in the budget in a way that made sense, as well as making the efficiencies to move forward and recognizing that these were the efficiencies gained in the first 3 months, and that we're continuing to work on efficiencies throughout the entire, it will be guaranteed through the entire next year's budget. To identify a couple of areas, the original reorganization consolidated all the administrative functions, and trying to realign the division saves approximately $500,000 in this budget. Some of the things that we identified for cost savings in the budget were with regard to contractual services, reducing the frequency of window washing, custodial security, and other services, saving about $157,000 a year. Utilities, we feel that the utility costs have been higher, have been budgeted higher than where they are currently, so we feel that we can get some savings with regard to the utilities, so we allowed the utility budget to drop $120,000. Some of the things that we're working on, a new snow hauling site, we will not see the benefit in the spring, but we will see the benefit in the fall. So basically this $250,000 savings is what we get in the fall, and then subsequently in the future years we would get double that savings for the snow hauling because of a new location. So that will be a big help when that becomes online. Some of the other things with combining Public Works really helps with regard to the
I got it. I'm letting him go.
It's all right.
Just want to make sure you got it.
With regard to funding, grant funded, bond funding, working together in the times where maintenance and operations can use some of the funding that used to be done, and within the past 12 years kind of drifted apart and wasn't done and was being funded by by operating tax dollars. And so we've really tried to look at that, dig deep into that, and understand where we can reuse some of our capital funds for repair, for long-term repairs rather than continuing to do piecemeal repairs on roads. So that we recognize, we feel that that program can save almost $1 million a year.
We're gonna just take 1 second, and I know you've just been on the job a short time, so, really, assembly members kind of ask the question, perhaps give Mr. Thompson the opportunity to respond offline, just because sort of getting his feet wet here, so go ahead, Mr. Horniman.
Well, I noticed that you got a difference of minus three positions, and maybe it's inside your book there, but with the numbers that you have and the way the reorganization occurred, where are the 3 positions less? Where are they coming from?
One of those positions was a traffic director, because in the consolidation, we left the traffic engineer but did not need the traffic director. The other positions had to do with
2 civil engineers.
Yeah, there's a lot of reorganization and upping positions, downing positions, trying to get, if we needed a CAD technician rather than a civil engineer, we downgraded the position to be a CAD technician, so we didn't have this engineer. There's a lot of up and down, so when you see a position go.
I'll probably get offline with you and kind of go through something.
Right, I could go over all of those positions. We have them all identified and done, and
Go ahead, Jennifer.
It's up and down.
Thanks, Paul.
And you can do this offline. The new snow site, I can't find it in here.
Okay,
have that
you
on
just
the-
want to know where that snow site is.
Yeah, and the capital cost of that.
I know we do. And there was, Mr. Trainee, go ahead.
Question the new snow site. What mitigation was done to ensure that the neighborhood's not gonna get flooded when that snow starts melting? You can address me later on this. I want to know specifically, because I've walked that area. Some of those homes along there get 3 feet of water in their backyard. And that was before the snow dump got put in. So I want to know what was done to mitigate the impact of the snow when it starts to melt. And do we have any policy in the city right now dealing with snow melt of snow dumps? Are they required after a certain amount of time to clear it off? Or is like Gary's Trucking that has a big snow thing there, that it's there until August or September, until it freezes, and next year it starts again? Thank you.
No problem.
Debbie.
We are wrestling in Title 21 with snow storage issues. There are some really potentially radical requirements of this new Alaska Pollution Discharge Elimination System that we are trying to get our hands on, but it could be really profound. Our costs for snow storage increasing, and private business costs could increase incredibly with this. One of the big things I'm interested in getting more answers on is the impact of all these fees, because apparently we're going to implement an increase, a whole bunch of fees in order to pay for the new higher standards with the APPES.
Mr. Trainee suggested a work session on that very
Okay,
topic,
just so you know, that's one that's hot button for me.
And we need to be cognizant of the public testimonies that come in under the budget article, so that's a suggestion for the administration. Thank you.
So a little on the additional things, we put in in the last several years, we put in a snow melt system both for the road and the sidewalks downtown, in a couple areas. And although we know that the road cannot be not heated because the road would run into an asset management problem you need to take, and that has to stay in effect, the sidewalks are able to be kept from being snow melted and cleared like all the other sidewalks in the last few years. In a budget time where you're looking to save money, I believe that the amenity of a snow melt system for the sidewalk, just to leave the boiler off for that portion of it for at least the time being is not a detrimental impact to our asset. That's why we put that in.
And that's a reasonable discussion, but some of those sidewalks abut municipal property. So we'll pay to shovel those blocks, or we're gonna leave those ones on?
I can get you a list of exactly where those are and which ones we propose to have off and what the snowplow program is.
I guess specifically, I'd be curious what we're actually saving if we're having to manually clear a sidewalk that we have a heating system in, if that's what we're in fact gonna do.
We could use the Merrill Field gas to keep that.
There you go, yeah.
Or the
Just pipe that
downtown
across.
Thanks, Ron.
Yes. Some of the other things that we have, repair, maintenance, supplies, prioritizing repairs, public safety, you know, they're infrastructure preservation. I mean, we're gonna keep the infrastructure preservation, but some of the things that can be deferred, we would be deferring those to subsequent years.
Is there an opportunity to consolidate maintenance shops across the municipality, in your opinion? I mean, working on a city bus and a fire truck might be a little bit different, but, you know, a road grader and you know, something.
You know, we've been talking about that internally, and we're actually looking into that as a bigger function. I know I've been talking with George about, we've been kind of deciding what we might do and whether or not we take a look at that. So it is in the works. There's a plan in place to try to take a look at that.
Well, and that's just back to the efficiency models that everybody's trying to press here as we're trying to balance taxes and efficiencies. There's a lot of equipment rolling in this town that's got its own mechanic associated with it, and I'm just looking at how many shops we have.
I think we're on the same opinion. If we can consolidate, we're going to consolidate absolutely. And so it is a item that we're looking at, and if we can, we will.
And McKenna's working out outstanding, so you are aware of that.
What's that?
The outsourcing to McKenna Group out in Chugiak Eagle River's working out outstanding. It works. It's a good model.
The accountability, typically, you know, there's many accountability measures that we're doing. This is just one of them, basically, for the M&O division. Protect, maintain, improve the roads drainage system through the organized efforts and effective use of the resources. So, you know, a couple of them, goals, measuring the 72 hours of plowouts within 72 hours. That's been pretty much a standard for many years. And so we try to monitor that. We're going to put that up to where everybody can see that. And typically, if it goes over 72, it'll have an identified qualifier why it did, equipment failures or whatever issues come up. But we monitor that all the time to make sure that we do
You have
that.
GPS tracking on your plows for municipally owned ones? Do you know where they're at?
You know, I'd have to, I don't know that offhand. But
Maybe
I can get you that
Jennifer,
answer.
Ms. Johnson asked a question about a year and a half ago.
I
We
can
were trending
definitely
towards
find
it,
it.
so.
Okay, we're trending towards it.
Yeah, if you can let us know how your GPS reporting is going and maybe link that online so we can see where our snowplows are at.
Right,
That's a good
I believe there's a website that kind of does something to that, but I'll find out exactly.
We're running at about a minute and a half. I hate to
Yeah.
cut you off. I tried not to limit anybody's time, but
That's all right. Potholes, same thing, you know, basically reporting potholes within 24 hours. And then the last slide has to do with the capital budget. The typical, this year we're going forward with basically close to a $31 million bond. The legislative package for state grants is looking at $121 million. And then other federal type grants, 6.8, so looking for 158 million for that. And then the future years are down at the bottom. And the only thing to do with our fees is we did increase fees for NEPDES, but because they're based very much, the fees that we put in are based very much on the construction and new construction, and construction has been down from years past, that we're not anticipating a huge amount for 2011, but it could be increased in years past.
If I could just chime in,
Yeah.
this is something that the Assembly needs to be aware of, because we are getting recommendations that are for our new plan that could substantially increase our costs for snow, substantially. Big deal.
we should have it snow less.
Resolve that, resolution.
Yeah, no, Debbie's right. I think there's a lot of stuff coming, especially. Thanks, Ron.
Community development.
Appreciate your transition to new leadership.
Okay, I'll follow up with what Ron has started, but Ron and I worked on the reorg for the past 9 months, and we're pretty excited about its implementation. I'll get to the first part of it, but for community development, we've reorganized development services, building safety, planning, and communities, private development, transportation planning out of traffic and neighborhoods into the new department. Some of these changes are new. Transportation planning was in the planning department previously. And neighborhoods, Mark Grant was in the planning department previously as well, but not weatherization. But we have 105 positions, 103 with one part-time and 2 part-time. But when you look in the details, you'll see that we actually had 4 positions that were eliminated in the department. And they were all vacant positions, 3 in development services and 1 in planning.
To that point, Mr. Honeman, did you have a comment?
Well, it's that one and the one right below it, so I can wait just a few moments.
The efficiencies we've created, hopefully we've created the management structure and the organization of the divisions within the department to efficiently deliver the best product that we can with the amount of resources that we have. We've eliminated the 4 positions, created the 2 deputy positions. Those are hard to follow, but if you want to talk about that further, we've got an org chart that shows the necessity for those 2 positions. Basically, one was the planning director position that had to be created because the planning director position moved to the community development director, and a new junior admin officer, as well as the development services deputy director, which that PCN basically moved over with Ron when he went to Public Works. So that there weren't any significantly differences in management that were created. They were across the board, so we can talk about that more in detail later if you like. We, on plan review, we had monies there that we could outsource for plan reviews when staff was overloaded. We've seen that we haven't been using that money over the past year, so we're proposing to reduce it for next year. We believe we will still have sufficient money there to process plans should the demand warrant. East Anchorage plan, we're postponing that to 2012.
I'm going to jump in on this one, Mr. Chairman, if we could. This is where I roll into, and I would love to talk to you more about the reorganization with the new additional admin officer and 2 deputies. And one of the main reasons I'll tell you that is it's in keeping with the community dialogues and all 3 that I went to. One of the biggest concerns, and number 1 and 2, the priority, was the reduction of admin and support positions if we had to make cuts. This administration's plan on making cuts, of course, the Assembly has that, and we have to make the decisions at the end, and we'll go back through and all the processes. But I have a little bit of concern that I have to answer to my constituents when we're adding positions at the, lack of a better term, chief level, and some of the worker bees are going away that deliver the services directly. So
Did
that's
you
a
add,
concern.
have you announced that position yet? I just want to know it's still vacant. Did you
They're all
announce it?
vacant positions.
Right.
Pardon?
They're all vacant positions.
No, you were supposed to announce who your choice was for that deputy position. Have you named somebody that yet?
Well, the position has been filled. It's the Development Services Deputy Director, and that's Sharon Walsh. She's a professional engineer. She has terrific credentials, and we're very happy to have her.
The next question I have is, and concern I have is that on the reprioritization of the district plan for East Anchorage, this is my understanding to be the 4th year in a row, that this plan has been funded a little bit down farther the field. And we now have a joint community councils working together in concert, and we'll see something, they're actually in concert discussion with some of the Halo and the Hillside area for the Hillside District plan, so we can work this together. So I think you'll see in short order. I think this is a mistake, and I'm really concerned about why we're moving this one more year. This is 4th year in a row, and that's not acceptable in my opinion. Thank you.
This is an FY. The state has contributed, I believe, $90,000 that we have that we plan to use in hopefully 2012 to actually get started on that plan. We'll have to program monies in additional to the $90,000, but it'll probably take about $140 to do the plan.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
On that point, if we were to get additional funding from the state, could we move ahead sooner rather than later? Because as Mr. Holman said, the community's moving ahead without you. They're tired of the city fumbling this. So if we were to get more money from the state, could we move ahead sooner?
Chickadee River did it.
And the Halo had, or the Hillside District plan folks had the same.
Obviously, it's about money. If we had additional state grant, we could manage that and accomplish that.
And you said you total needed about 140, and we have, what, 90 from the state?
80. We presently have 80.
We currently have 80, okay. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
The reprioritizations of monies we postponed, you've probably heard quite a bit about Hanson, you probably know nothing at all about the planning side of that software that the planning uses. It's called CityView. We were moving towards a migration to a net version of that. Because of the study that IT is doing at this point in time, we want to see what kind of efficiencies we're going to use in the future. So we postpone moving CityView up to the net version for 2011. We have some debt service, we have some bank loans that we need to repay for Hanson, so that's part of our obligation there. And on our measures, actually, quite frankly, I checked yesterday, and we're still able to accomplish the same-day inspections up through the third quarter this year. So those are working. Those people in that division are working great. The next one for the planning division is not so telling charts, but what I can give you the background is that in 2003 we adjusted the fees for planning. We had a proposal that they be tied to the CPI. That was taken out at the assembly level. So our fees really haven't kept up with CPI, and the labor costs probably reflect that as well. So for those two reasons, that's why the cost per case appears to be going up.
Just to that point, I've sort of gotten involved with the financial end of 181 and that sort of discussion. So we need to probably have a talk about, as the fees with the green sheet here, the fees and the short funding in 181 and the expectations of the communities, I guess, between now and the end of the year.
About that, we're hopeful that with the fee adjustments that we're proposing, we'll maintain the 180 fund at a neutral place, but it still needs some help.
Yeah, you still don't balance your budget necessarily with the reorg and the fee increase yet, do you?
It's close.
Okay.
So the last, we do, it appears we're going to have some additional discussion on fees, these fees, and we have additional fees and planning we're proposing as well, and about $60,000 in addition to what you see here on this slide.
On your fee chart, I just had a technical question on the graduated fees for mechanical inspection of ice melt systems. You got 25, 13, 14. There's a couple times in the chart now where we've not seen why there's a graduated fee level and how does the user get that information on what you've got in mind. So I just have some technical questions, but maybe you want to review those.
I appreciate the heads up. We'll have all the appropriate people there that can address those issues.
Yeah, work session, Mr. Training, you want to announce that now, or do you want to think
I'll
about it?
announce it now. We're gonna have a work session next Friday, starting at 1 o'clock. The first one will be relative to legal fees, because we've got a lot of legal issues. Now we'll go into executive sessions for that. After coming out of that, then we're gonna meet on AO 81, which deals with fines and fees. Because we're gonna be moving, a lot of us are not gonna be here. So next Friday, I've got a special meeting, we're gonna go over this. We're spend an hour and a half going over these fines and fees.
What's the time, Mr. Chairman?
Noon to 1:30 for the legal, and 1:30 to 3 for fines and
For
fees.
fines and fees, because I think this is substantial enough, we've gotta have the time.
Well, I want to have the public input too. We've already talked
I know,
about
we'll
that.
have the
we've
public
got-
input, but I want us to at least flesh it out in our own minds so we know what we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman, first you said
Sir?
work session, then you said special meeting.
The first meeting is a special meeting because we're gonna go to executive session on legal fees. Coming out of that, then it's a assembly work session, not a special meeting, it's just a work session on fines and fees, sir.
And then the Friday after
Making
that,
it
we've got
clear.
another one of these on November 5th. So we have it. Jerry, sorry we cut you off a little bit, but you can see the strategy, or my attitude is to give you guys time to get your department under control and figure out how those changes are. You've got full authorization as of last meeting to integrate. So, and I'll just shut it down here in about 30 seconds. It was very well done. I appreciate it. Mayor, did you have to add anything?
No, just I think as you see all the department reports that for the first time in a long time, having performance measures, identifiable goals and measurable ways to know whether we're achieving those goals, I think should be a good help not only for the departments, but for you as an assembly making your decisions, but most importantly for the public, so they can see what we are accomplishing with the money that you approve for us. So that's a big plus.
And just, Cheryl, timely answers to the questions and round through the, direct to the assembly members and route the clearinghouse to the clerk. And
Right.
we got it.
And to help with the coordination, and I'll send an email out to the departments, but we'll have them come to us, we'll just help consolidate and
Don't-
follow, to make sure that they get responded to.
Don't print 11 sets of everything because it's, I think, a better way to do it clerically as well as environmentally. Thank you, guys. Closed.